Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Cargen Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was a charismatic individual who naturally drew people's attention. One day he caught the captivating gaze of Cargen Oviedo, a woman with a fiery passion for life and an infectious energy. They instantly connected, sharing similar interests and dreams, as well as a strong determination and entrepreneurial drive. This chance encounter led to a beautiful relationship that brought them true happiness. In 2016, the couple took the next step, moving in together and launching their own business, a warehouse, in their home. Cargen's keen eye for detail shone as she created a welcoming sign on one of the windows for customer service, alongside lists of items for sale. This was their pride and joy, a small but thriving venture. The people of Mañata watched this happy and driven couple with admiration and curiosity, wondering who they were and how they achieved so much. While many knew Cargen from her childhood, Rolando remained an enigma, with his past in Bolivia remaining a mystery to all. Rolando not only co-ran the business with Cargen, but he also worked at the Galeen Fair, where wholesale fruit sales took place. From the outside, it seemed like they had found their perfect life together, but even the strongest relationships can be put to the test. One day, Rolando was shocked to find Cargen in the car with another man. His initial reaction was anger, and in that moment, he almost destroyed the car's interior. Their picture-perfect relationship crumbled in a matter of minutes. However, Rolando decided to forgive and continue their relationship, choosing to move forward with the one he loved. To outsiders, they still appeared to be the ideal couple, capable of overcoming any obstacle together. Rolando Angel Aquino, born in 1987 in Bolivia, is an enigmatic figure. The exact date of his arrival in Argentina remains unknown, like many other aspects of his life. As the eldest of 7 children, Rolando learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from a young age. He dreamed of a happy family filled with joy and laughter. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez, with whom he had a son. Despite their difficulties, the couple remained on good terms. Later in life, Rolando had a second son, Elias, with Soledad Guardio. Although his relationships with Soledad didn't work out, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He maintained a warm relationship with the mothers of his children and stayed in touch with them. Rolando was a physically fit man who prioritized his health from a young age. He played sports and soccer for the local team to stay active. His colleagues and loved ones described him as kind, hardworking, and sociable. Although he got along well with his neighbors, Rolando had a unique charm when it came to socializing. Cargen was born on March 30th, 1990, and grew up in Monado, where she and Rolando later set up their warehouse. The locals knew her as an outgoing and open-minded woman. Like Rolando, Cargen longed for a happy and successful family life with a loving and devoted partner. However, it took her some time to find the right person to build her happiness with. Cargen had 2 daughters from previous relationships before meeting Rolando. One of her former partners, Rule O.A., was the father of one of the girls, and she married him in 2013. However, their marriage was troubled and eventually headed for a breakdown. Rule claimed that financial struggles were one of the main reasons for their conflicts. Feeling anxious about his life and seeking better opportunities, Rule left his family under the pretense of buying something essential, fleeing the city and moving abroad to avoid being traced. By the summer of 2019, 9-year-old Elias was living with Rolando and Cargen. They had made plans to spend quality time together in the coming months. However, on the morning of July 12, 2019, Rolando found Elias unwell when he went to wish him good morning before leaving for work. Concerned, Rolando took Elias to the children's hospital to see a pediatrician. After an examination, the doctors determined that Elias's condition was critical, and he was rushed to the intensive care unit. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Elias tragically passed away shortly after arriving at the hospital. The remarkable thing about Elias's death was that he had been in perfect health when he left home, showing no unusual symptoms, and seemed equally well when he arrived at his father's house. However, the medical report was shocking. It revealed that Elias had died from severe poisoning, which caused his organs to fail and a blood clot in his brain. This news left Elias's parents stunned, as they could not understand how their active and healthy son could have suddenly died from such a mysterious illness. As part of their professional duty, the doctors recommended further forensic investigation. However, Elias's mother and grandmother were too grief-stricken to consider this, and they refused. The funeral home Karjan suggested cremating the body, but Elias's mother declined, preferring to bury her son in a private cemetery where she could visit his grave and lay flowers. Elias's sudden death shattered Rolando's heart, leaving him devastated by the loss of his youngest son. Karjan, who was caring and loving, stood by him every step of the way, never leaving his side. She took charge of all their business affairs, providing him with gentle support and helping him navigate his pain and grief. As time passed, the warmth and love from the woman he cherished gradually eased his suffering. 16 months after the tragedy, Rolando took a major step and proposed to Karjan, and they got married, with Rolando convinced she'd always be by his side. However, their happiness was short-lived. On February 6, 2022, Karjan returned home from a beauty salon and gym visit, and the next day, February 7th, she noticed Rolando was experiencing serious health issues. A medical ambulance was called to their home as Rolando, 35, suddenly felt very ill after vomiting profusely and collapsed in their living room. The housekeeper called for emergency medical help. At the Santa Maria clinic, doctors allowed Karjan to see her husband, but his condition was critical. Despite the medical staff's efforts, Rolando passed away on February 9th. The cause of death was severe poisoning, which raised questions among the medical staff, given Rolando was a healthy and active sportsman. Rolando's wife, Karjan, revealed that he was taking medication to treat dark skin spots. However, this information raised red flags among specialists. Upon further investigation, tests disclosed an abnormal amount of calcium oxalate crystals in Rolando's system, a telling sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, a key ingredient in car antifreeze. The sudden and mysterious death of Rolando sparked a high-priority investigation by the authorities. The prosecutor's office launched a thorough inquiry into the neighborhood where the Aquino couple resided. Neighbors became crucial witnesses, reporting that Karjan had frequently administered her husband unknown medication. They knew she used these drugs to attend a party without her husband. Nevertheless, neighbors also expressed concerns about Rolando's son, leading investigators to consider the possibility that Karjan intended to sedate her husband temporarily rather than kill him. The Technology Crimes Unit officers' findings completely dismissed the idea that Rolando's death was accidental. They requested forensic examinations and questioned Karjan, Rolando's wife, thoroughly. However, during the interrogation, Karjan's responses were contradictory. The officers asked her to identify the substance she had given her husband before he died, and she claimed it was a skin blemish remedy that she had administered through an IV. When they asked her to produce a vial of the solution, Karjan said the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, had already thrown it away. But when the officers interviewed Claudia, she denied Karjan's statement about the discarded vial. Claudia also revealed that she had overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with his medication. Karjan was detained and her cell phone was seized as part of the investigation. The news of Rolando's death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Those who regularly visited the Aquino couple's warehouse and other locals were also stunned. Everyone struggled to understand what had happened and why the family's father had died so suddenly. Rolando's ex-husband was shocked when rumors started circulating that Karjan had deliberately poisoned him. The ex-husband described Karjan as always being affectionate and never violent towards him. However, an investigation into Karjan's phone revealed that she had searched online for information on the most deadly poisons and ways to erase her search history. Furthermore, records showed that she had ordered ethylene glycol twice from an online store. According to the Agency for Toxic Substances and the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, ethylene glycol is a synthetic substance used in antifreeze production, which is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely toxic to humans. Based on forensic evidence and other clues, the prosecutor's office accused Karjan of intentionally poisoning Rolando by mixing the substance with orange juice, which severely damaged his health and ultimately led to his death. A series of strange and tragic events in the Aquino family prompted the authorities to take drastic action. Suspicions arose over the cause of 9-year-old Elias's death, leading to a new investigation. The prosecutor's office launched a detailed probe into the boy's medical history. According to his mother, Elias was healthy and active until he suddenly slipped into a coma at his father's house, never to recover. However, the death certificate stated that the cause was a malfunction of his internal systems and cerebral thrombosis. Investigators doubted that a healthy 9-year-old could have died from such causes. The prosecutor's office requested information on possible ethylene glycol purchases and received a response confirming that Karjan had bought the poison on July 2, 2019, shortly before Elias arrived at the Aquino home. Relatives also confirmed that Karjan insisted on cremating Elias's body, but the birth mother refused, preferring to bury her son. The gathered evidence was sufficient for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file new aggravated murder charges against Karjan on March 4th, related to Elias's poisoning. On March 14th, a judge ordered Karjan's pre-trial detention, which she tried to appeal, but the judge rejected, ruling that she should remain in custody until the trial began. The highly anticipated trial commenced on November 28, 2022, at the Mendoza Criminal Court, drawing widespread public and media interest. 2 pending indictments were being addressed, one led by prosecutor Fernando Guzzo, focusing on the murder of Elias, and the other involving Claudia Rios, related to the murder of Rolando. Karjan's defense team sought to counter the charges, claiming that Rolando had a history of violence and abuse, and that there was insufficient reliable evidence to support the allegations. They emphasized that Karjan lacked a motive for the murders, pointing out that she was the sole owner of the house, cars, and business. The defense also argued that the charges against Karjan were unfounded and suggested that her partner might have purchased antifreeze by hacking into her account. Additionally, Karjan claimed to have an alibi for February 6th, the day her husband was poisoned, as she was not at home when he began experiencing health problems. After the initial phase of the trial, the defendant, dubbed the Gumalan poisoner by the media, was given the opportunity to speak. Emotionally, Karjan denied committing the heinous crime, stating that it was extremely distressing for her to be accused of something she did not do, especially considering she was a mother to 2 young daughters. The court hearing continued, with a focus on witness testimony that brought new aspects of the case to light. The prosecution questioned Karjan, targeting key points. Specifically, they asked her if she had suggested cremating her son Rolando. Karjan responded firmly that the decision wasn't hers to make, and she never made such a suggestion. Next, the prosecution called relatives of the deceased to testify, providing more details about what happened. Soledad Elias's mother took the stand, telling the court that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karjan had suggested cremating Elias's body so that both families could keep the boy's ashes. However, Soledad rejected the idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karjan's jealousy. According to her, Karjan and Rolando's relationship was troubled to the point where they even slept in separate beds. Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, was another witness. She stated that her ex-husband Rolando and Karjan slept in separate rooms, although she had never interacted with Karjan before the incident. However, on the morning of February 8th, Karjan called Carolina to inform her that Rolando was ill and hospitalized. Karjan claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell, and asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was seeing another woman. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. When she arrived at the hospital, Karjan was already there, talking to the doctors. Carolina was not allowed to enter, so she waited outside. As she was leaving, Karjan told her that everyone else had left, which made Carolina suspicious. She demanded an explanation from the doctors, who told her that Rolando had lost consciousness and was not responding to treatment. Carolina then complained to the hospital secretary and later spoke to Karjan, who claimed that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. According to Karjan, the medication bottle was no longer available because the housekeeper had thrown it away. The accumulation of these details only served to deepen the mystery surrounding this complex case. As the trial progressed, medical professionals and experts took the stand to present crucial forensic evidence, as well as the findings of a comprehensive psychological examination. This new evidence shed light on previously overlooked details that had gone unnoticed until then. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician at the hospital, recalled Elias's hospitalization in July 2019. At the time, Elias was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing problems and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a severe blood clot in his brain. Elias received intensive care, and Dr. Marinelli confirmed that his symptoms matched those of ethylene glycol poisoning. These symptoms included impaired consciousness, restlessness, and eventually a coma, accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Elias's condition deteriorated, and at 5 p.m. on July 12th, he suffered cardiac and respiratory arrest. Medical personnel, including his father, attempted to resuscitate Elias for 50 minutes, but unfortunately, all efforts were in vain, and he was pronounced dead at 6 p.m. The jury reviewed the results of Karjan's psychological evaluation, which was conducted at the request of the prosecution. The experts' findings indicated that Karjan was dishonest and hid the truth, projecting an image of decency while actually being cold and cruel. Notably, a psychological examination was conducted shortly after her husband's death, but it revealed no emotional impact from the loss, raising questions about her sincerity and reinforcing her portrayal as a self-centered woman. The examiners also detected signs of hidden hostility and impulsive behaviors in Karjan. The prosecutor questioned Karjan's claim of being a victim of gender-based violence, as she had described in her testimony. This information collectively painted a detailed psychological portrait of the defendant. After weeks of tense anticipation and continuous court proceedings, the trial finally reached its conclusion. The packed courtroom was filled with people, their eyes fixed anxiously on the jury and the judge, awaiting the verdict that would bring justice to this complex and tragic case. The prosecutor asked the jury to convict Karjan, emphasizing that the evidence pointed to her as the mastermind and perpetrator of both murders. She bought ethylene glycol, got rid of the packaging, and made it look like regular juice. As a result, her loved ones suffered and died without her assistance. The prosecution and the plaintiff urged the jury to deliver a unanimous guilty verdict, insisting it was the only way to achieve justice. They wanted Karjan to be convicted of murder with evidence of extreme cruelty. In contrast, the defense argued that there wasn't enough evidence to prove their client's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They claimed that a person's character, good or bad, doesn't necessarily determine their involvement in a crime, and that for their client, the deaths of Rolando and his son were a devastating tragedy. Despite the defense's arguments, Karjan joined the notorious ranks of Argentine criminals who poisoned their victims. After a lengthy silence and a tense wait for the verdict, the jury delivered their decision. In a unanimous verdict, they found Karjan guilty of murdering Elias and committing the crime with exceptional cruelty. Additionally, they convicted her of Rolando's aggravated death, which was caused by an insidious procedure. Karjan, dressed in black with white beads around her neck, remained expressionless as she heard the verdict. The jury's guilty verdict resulted in her receiving a life sentence in prison. Karjan, the defendant, attempted to evade punishment for the treacherous murders that shocked society and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies may have been her final attempt to avoid the punishment she deserved. Nevertheless, the court and jury remained unmoved by her tactics and delivered a just verdict. Why did Karjan kill her loved ones? This question remains unanswered, a mystery that continues to baffle. On the surface, she had everything one could ask for to be happy. Yet perhaps the root of her motive lay hidden in the recesses of her own soul, driven by jealousy, self-interest, or an inflated sense of pride. Despite the heinous nature of her crime, Karjan refused to acknowledge her guilt, leaving the true motives behind this dark act unclear. Now, as Kanova faces a lengthy prison sentence, she will have ample time to reflect on the dark forces that may have consumed her, ultimately destroying not only her own life, but also those around her. This tragic tale serves as a poignant reminder that even in the closest of relationships, terrible secrets and mysteries can lurk beneath the surface, and that true love and loyalty must always be our guiding principles. On Monday, September 17, 2018, in Ames, Iowa, the weather was warm and clear. That morning, Celia Barkin-Arroyna, 22 years old, decided to head to Coldwater Golf Links Club to play golf before her university classes. On her way there, she chatted with her mother. Her mom, sensing something might be off, asked if everything was okay and safe on the course. Celia confidently assured her that she was perfectly safe and that there were plenty of people around. Sadly though, as it turned out, no place is entirely safe. Soon after arriving at the course, this talented athlete became the victim of a terrible crime. Celia was born on July 6, 1996, in Point San Miguel, a village in Cantabria in northern Spain. Her family had lived there for 8 generations. She moved to Iowa thanks to an athletic golf scholarship. Offered many choices by various universities due to her talent in golf, she ultimately chose Ames, Iowa, a quaint town of 65,000 people reminding her of home. Her family remained back in Spain. Her parents, Maria Arusa and Marcos Barkin, had 2 children, Celia and Andres. Her father worked as a butcher. Her mother initially worked as a salesperson in a clothing store, but became a housewife after having children. Though they weren't wealthy and led modest lives, the family was tight-knit and determined to provide a good education for their children. Andres went to law school, while Celia's success in golf earned her the scholarship to the United States. Celia's love for golf came from her mother, who loved the sport when she was young herself. Even though Celia was smaller than other girls her age, she adapted by using specific techniques to win. Celia's story is one of talent and promise cut tragically short. She sought opportunity far from home, only to face an unimaginable end in what seemed like a safe and peaceful refuge. When the girl grew up, she was petite and worked tirelessly on her game. Considering her short stature, she dreamed of becoming a professional and successful golfer, not for popularity, but out of sheer determination to succeed in the sport. She wanted to make life easier for her parents. The girl constantly spoke about buying them a house and taking care of them. For this purpose, Celia practiced diligently to achieve excellent results. Throughout her career, Celia received many titles and awards. She won victories in various competitions. Specifically, Celia secured the European Women's Amateur Championship in Slovenia in June 2018. She finished second in the women's team golf competition in Europe and was the 2018 Big 12 Women's Golf Champion in the United States. Additionally, she was named the 2018 Iowa State Athlete of the Year. Given these achievements, there were high expectations for her future. When Celia moved to the United States, her relationship with her family remained strong. She communicated with her parents daily, sometimes even 4 or 5 times each day when she had free time. Celia missed her family deeply. A nightly call before bed to say goodnight and share daily successes became a cherished ritual. During vacations, she would visit her family in Spain and continue training hard to improve her skills during these visits. Her mother supported her passion and trained alongside her. Celia settled well in Iowa, where she lived with her boyfriend Carlos Negri Nobilis in a rented apartment. Their relationship has an intriguing history. When Celia and Carlos met at university, she was dating another individual at that time, while Carlos fell for her instantly. Her charming smile, piercing gaze, cheerfulness, and kindness captivated him, while her determination earned his respect. Despite his feelings, Carlos accepted that Celia was with someone else, but became her best friend and steadfast supporter for over a year, until she eventually became disillusioned with her boyfriend and ended the relationship. Carlos finally confessed his feelings during one of their walks. Celia, pulling him by his shirt, kissed him, and without a word, drove away in her car. Carlos was overjoyed that she felt the same way. He ran around the dormitory screaming with happiness. That's how their romance began. To celebrate this new chapter, Carlos set off fireworks to impress Celia. He even sent her a video where he confessed she was incredible and one in a billion. After that, they were inseparable. They moved in together and started sharing their lives. Lately, their conversations included dreams about their wedding and even potential names for their future children. By May 2017, they were engaged and preparing for the biggest event of their lives. That same year, Carlos graduated with a college degree and secured a position at an engineering firm in Ames. Celia was finishing her last semester at Iowa State University, majoring in civil engineering as well. After ending her athletic career, Celia dreamed of being an engineer to benefit others. She wanted to show that women could succeed in construction too. Celia excelled academically and showed through her own experience the success women could achieve in this field. She had many friends and enjoyed surprising them with delicious Spanish dishes she cooked well. Among the university students, there was a popular video of Celia flipping a Spanish omelet into the air, adding butter to it mid-flip so it burst like a fireball. A trick she performed masterfully when requested by friends. In summer 2018, Celia returned to Spain to spend time with her family, but came back to Iowa later to graduate. The promising athlete was part of the Iowa State women's golf team and also competed individually. She was preparing for an upcoming competition, but unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. The assassin was already on the lookout for a victim and preparing for an attack when Celia arrived at the golf club on September 17, 2018. She had just finished a conversation with her mother. The staff, familiar with the notable athlete, informed her that 15 older gentlemen from Des Moines had also arrived and were scheduled to play golf at 8:45. The group was directed to the starting line where the first 4 holes were located. Celia watched them arrive in golf carts and begin their game. A collection of retirees indicated to her to advance and begin her round. Celia complied, using her cart to play the first hole, then advancing directly to number 4 so as not to delay the senior group. The seniors described her as both polite and friendly. Celia then proceeded toward the 7th hole, an area less frequented due to its distance from other holes and its border with Squaw Creek Park, which was known for its dense vegetation. Athletes generally avoided this area as it could sometimes host unauthorized visitors and even aggressive homeless individuals. Unfamiliar with these local nuances, she ventured there nonetheless. Players needing to reach the 9th hole had to cross a bridge via a wide path and navigate through a section of woods. One coach remarked that this area felt quite eerie, akin to Sleepy Hollow. Celia was headed that way later in the morning. Around 10:30 a.m., a group of 15 people approached this location and saw Celia's cart with her belongings still in place, but Celia herself was nowhere in sight. While playing on the field, they noted something unusual. Celia hadn't appeared within 10 minutes, causing concern among the group. Deciding to investigate further, they approached her cart and sought out any sign of Celia. As they drew nearer, they observed her t-shirt, baseball cap, and various personal items scattered in the field. Her phone remained on the cart. It seemed as though some items might have accidentally fallen from her pocket. However, why her t-shirt was lying around and why she had abandoned her phone remained unclear. They searched around, but there was no one in. Next, they the club management and reported the troubling discovery. The group mentioned they'd seen a pretty blonde girl playing golf earlier, but now she was gone and her stuff was still there. The staff who arrived recognized it was Celia and started looking for her. In less than half an hour, they found a body floating in the pond near the 9th hole. That's when called the police. Once they retrieved the body from the water, officers identified her. It was Celia Barkin, the reigning European champion. Celia had been stabbed several times in both the neck and torso. A search dog immediately picked up a trail and led officers to a tent in a wooded area of Squaw Creek Park. However, the tent was empty, with blood inside. The police thought a homeless man might have attacked Celia and began searching for him. Just as they were searching near the tent, a man approached them saying he lived there and wanted to get his tent. His name was Colin Richards. He was also 22 years old like Celia, but their lives were worlds apart. Officers quickly realized he might be involved in the murder. His face was scratched up. Inside his black backpack, they found bloody clothes, a t-shirt and shorts along with clean clothes he had changed into. The search dogs even reacted to his scent. Richards had a deep wound on his left arm that was bleeding. He tried hiding it from officers. Based on this evidence, Colin Richards was taken into custody by police. According to him, before law enforcement arrived, he'd been at a friend's house. 2 male friends had brought him back to the park to get his tent, and when he got there, he saw police. Richards denied any involvement in the crime and stated he had never met Celia. He claimed the scratches on his face were from branches encountered while walking through wooded areas. Colin was already known to police due to his abuse of illegal substances, alcohol, and mental health problems. He became after he was released from prison 3 months prior to the murder. Colin had served about 7 months in jail for burglary and had previously been convicted several times for offenses, demonstrating a long history of legal troubles. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, Colin had been familiar to law enforcement since his teenage years. Detectives interviewed 3 men who were acquaintances of Colin. One of the homeless men shared a tent with him, while the other 2 provided him a ride from his home to the park. The owner of the house allowed Colin to wash and change his clothes because he was disheveled, covered in mud, blood, sand, and water. After cleaning up and changing clothes, Colin left with his bloody garments in a black backpack to run to the park for his tent. According to these men, Colin was acting unusually that day, extremely nervous and in a hurry. He did not explain why he needed to leave so suddenly, but merely said he had badly cut himself and soiled his clothes. Another homeless man living with him mentioned that Colin always carried a serrated knife used for domestic purposes. Just a day before the murder, Colin had expressed a desire to rape and kill someone. However, this statement wasn't taken seriously by his friend. Consequently, Colin was charged with first-degree murder immediately after Celia's body was discovered. Investigators believed the crime was premeditated. They thought he planned to kill someone and was actively searching for a victim that day. The judge set bail at $5 million. However, lacking such funds, Colin remained in custody awaiting trial. Meanwhile, Celia's family in Spain remained unaware of these tragic events, but grew increasingly worried as she hadn't returned their calls or messages. Police officers alongside Ames tried reaching out to their colleagues in Point San Miguel and embassy personnel in Madrid to inform Celia's family about the terrible news. However, since it was past midnight in Spain, there was no one available at work or answering the phone. The coach had to make the most difficult phone call of his life. After several hours with no updates, the parents learned that their daughter had been brutally. Later, a serrated knife was discovered in a wooded area containing fingerprints and DNA of the homeless man. Additionally, blood under the victim's fingernails contained particles of Colin's skin, demonstrating that these scratches were inflicted by the deceased rather than by branches. Initially, the homeless man denied any guilt. However, under pressure from substantial evidence, he confessed to his actions. He stated that he had consumed substances that day and was not thinking clearly. While walking through the woods, he saw a young girl who was alone and decided she would be an easy target. Colin had never met or known her before. Celia was an unfortunate victim of his violent attack. Iowa abolished the death penalty in 1965. Thus, he faced a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. At his trial, Colin's family provided an account of his life. His parents were never married or living together when he was born. For the first 10 years of his life, Colin lived with his father, who raised him strictly and often sent him to bed alone while frequenting bars himself. His grandparents cared for him during this period until his mother contested custody and brought him to live with her after marrying another man and having 2 more children. They resided in the countryside because it seemed more peaceful there. The household maintained strict discipline, and Colin's room was always spotless, a point which led family members to joke that he should join the army. Colin performed well academically, but began experiencing behavioral problems as a teenager after reconnecting with his alcoholic father. Despite attempts by his father to re-educate him, Colin did not heed advice and was ultimately kicked out of their home at age 15. From there, he joined poor company, dropped out of school, and became addicted to alcohol as well as other substances. When Colin was 18, he had a girlfriend who was twice his age. In May 2015, he was arrested for domestic violence. He was found and sentenced to 60 days in jail. Another time, when was accused of shoplifting, he threatened to return and shoot up the place. Cole's life spiraled out of control, but no one seemed to notice. In the 2 years that followed the domestic violence case, he was repeatedly arrested for theft, harassment, and attempted burglary. He was sent to undergo behavioral intervention courses, which didn't help. In November 2017, Colin was incarcerated at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility for 2 years for burglary, as well as a probation violation. Despite disciplinary problems, including fights with other inmates, he was released on parole after just 7 months in June 2018 because the prison was running out of space. Only 3 months later, he killed Celia. After leaving prison, Colin was met by his mother and stepfather with whom he lived. They resumed their relationship and corresponded while Colin was behind bars. His parents believed in him and gave him a chance for a normal life, taking his word that he would not use illegal substances and cease communicating with old friends from bad company. However, 2 weeks later, he was kicked out of his home for not keeping his promise. Colin headed to Ames, which was an hour away from his home. For a while, he found refuge in the city's only homeless shelter, but there weren't enough beds. He asked his mother for help, and she bought him a tent. In his new city, Colin quickly came to the attention of the Ames Police Department. On June 29th, he was arrested for public drunkenness. On August 11th, police received a complaint from a Target store that Colin and another homeless man were camping in an open lot behind the store and were chased away. They then camped in Squaw Creek Park so as not to disturb anyone else. Colin stated that the police permitted them to camp there, but this is contradicted by the police, who assert that overnight camping in the park is prohibited and no one advised him to break the law. On September 2nd, just 15 days before Celia's murder, police responded to a call at Burger where Colin had threatened customers with his knife. Despite this, he was released. On September 8th, his mother and stepfather came to Ames to celebrate Colin's 22nd birthday. They took him to dinner and then to the laundromat to wash his clothes. His mother was concerned about his behavior. Colin was uncommunicative and distant, giving brief, one-word responses to their questions. After they dropped him off at a tent in the park where he was living with another homeless man, they drove home. At that point, Colin confessed to his friend that he wanted to rape and kill a woman. Tragically, Celia was found dead the next morning, though she had not been raped. Police believe he did not have enough time. Colin's parents said it was his own fault. They tried to help him, but could not change his path. Consequently, Cullen received a life sentence without parole on August 23, 2019. He's currently serving his sentence at Story County Jail in Nevada, Iowa. The entire town of Ames mourned Celia's death. Thousands gathered for a candlelight ceremony to honor the talented athlete. Her family was devastated by the news of her murder and outraged that someone who had achieved nothing and aspired to nothing had so cruelly taken her life. Cullen showed no regard for Celia's life. He chose her randomly and killed her because of a violent impulse. The family of the deceased found some solace in the verdict and were relieved that the perpetrator was apprehended quickly and prevented from harming anyone else again. They only wished they hadn't let their daughter go so far away, even though it was her dream. Statistically, the U.S. is not safe. The per capita murder rate in the U.S. is 26 times higher than in Spain. In their small town in Spain, the last murder was 100 years ago. All to blame, the family believes, is the widespread availability of illegal substances, which are literally at every turn. This has led to an increase in violence. Her parents have kept Celia's room exactly as she left it, with one notable addition: an engineering degree posthumously awarded by the state of Iowa. They often stroll through the local golf club and remember when their daughter took her first steps in the sport. Here, the community of Ames, including the university administration and students, were outraged by this crime. Particularly concerning was that the golf course bordered a wooded area and had no fencing. As a result of this negligence by the golf club, the girl's life was put in danger. This was not the first murder case in that neighborhood. Back in 2008, there was a stabbing incident where one man was killed and a homeless assailant was found guilty of murder. It remains unknown if measures were subsequently taken by the golf club to ensure player safety on holes 7 and N. After Celia's death, her boyfriend Carlos could not stay in a city where everything reminded him of her. Carlos moved to Florida, and his further fate is unknown. Celia's brother experienced considerable stress following her death and lost significant weight. After receiving a law degree, he decided to join the police force to help others, a path encouraged by his sister, who had always hinted at his purpose in life. On Monday, September 17, 2018, in Ames, Iowa, the weather was warm and clear. That morning, Celia Barkin-Arroyna, 22 years old, decided to head to Coldwater Golf Links Club to play golf before her university classes. On her way there, she chatted with her mother. Her mom, sensing something might be off, asked if everything was okay and safe on the course. Celia confidently assured her that she was perfectly safe and that there were plenty of people around. Sadly though, as it turned out, no place is entirely safe. Soon after arriving at the course, this talented athlete became the victim of a terrible crime. Celia was born on July 6, 1996, in Point San Miguel, a village in Cantabria in northern Spain. Her family had lived there for 8 generations. She moved to Iowa thanks to an athletic golf scholarship. Offered many choices by various universities due to her talent in golf, she ultimately chose Ames, Iowa, a quaint town of 65,000 people reminding her of home. Her family remained back in Spain. Her parents, Maria Arusa and Marcos Barkin, had 2 children, Celia and Andres. Her father worked as a butcher. Her mother initially worked as a salesperson in a clothing store, but became a housewife after having children. Though they weren't wealthy and led modest lives, the family was tight-knit and determined to provide a good education for their children. Andres went to law school, while Celia's success in golf earned her the scholarship to the United States. Celia's love for golf came from her mother, who loved the sport when she was young herself. Even though Celia was smaller than other girls her age, she adapted by using specific techniques to win. Celia's story is one of talent and promise cut tragically short. She sought opportunity far from home, only to face an unimaginable end in what seemed like a safe and peaceful refuge. When the girl grew up, she was petite and worked tirelessly on her game. Considering her short stature, she dreamed of becoming a professional and successful golfer, not for popularity, but out of sheer determination to succeed in the sport. She wanted to make life easier for her parents. The girl constantly spoke about buying them a house and taking care of them. For this purpose, Celia practiced diligently to achieve excellent results. Throughout her career, Celia received many titles and awards. She won victories in various competitions. Specifically, Celia secured the European Women's Amateur Championship in Slovenia in June 2018. She finished second in the women's team golf competition in Europe and was the 2018 Big 12 Women's Golf Champion in the United States. Additionally, she was named the 2018 Iowa State Athlete of the Year. Given these achievements, there were high expectations for her future. When Celia moved to the United States, her relationship with her family remained strong. She communicated with her parents daily, sometimes even 4 or 5 times each day when she had free time. Celia missed her family deeply. A nightly call before bed to say goodnight and share daily successes became a cherished ritual. During vacations, she would visit her family in Spain and continue training hard to improve her skills during these visits. Her mother supported her passion and trained alongside her. Celia settled well in Iowa, where she lived with her boyfriend Carlos Negri Nobilis in a rented apartment. Their relationship has an intriguing history. When Celia and Carlos met at university, she was dating another individual at that time, while Carlos fell for her instantly. Her charming smile, piercing gaze, cheerfulness, and kindness captivated him, while her determination earned his respect. Despite his feelings, Carlos accepted that Celia was with someone else, but became her best friend and steadfast supporter for over a year, until she eventually became disillusioned with her boyfriend and ended the relationship. Carlos finally confessed his feelings during one of their walks. Celia, pulling him by his shirt, kissed him, and without a word, drove away in her car. Carlos was overjoyed that she felt the same way. He ran around the dormitory screaming with happiness. That's how their romance began. To celebrate this new chapter, Carlos set off fireworks to impress Celia. He even sent her a video where he confessed she was incredible and one in a billion. After that, they were inseparable. They moved in together and started sharing their lives. Lately, their conversations included dreams about their wedding and even potential names for their future children. By May 2017, they were engaged and preparing for the biggest event of their lives. That same year, Carlos graduated with a college degree and secured a position at an engineering firm in Ames. Celia was finishing her last semester at Iowa State University, majoring in civil engineering as well. After ending her athletic career, Celia dreamed of being an engineer to benefit others. She wanted to show that women could succeed in construction too. Celia excelled academically and showed through her own experience the success women could achieve in this field. She had many friends and enjoyed surprising them with delicious Spanish dishes she cooked well. Among the university students, there was a popular video of Celia flipping a Spanish omelet into the air, adding butter to it mid-flip so it burst like a fireball. A trick she performed masterfully when requested by friends. In summer 2018, Celia returned to Spain to spend time with her family, but came back to Iowa later to graduate. The promising athlete was part of the Iowa State women's golf team and also competed individually. She was preparing for an upcoming competition, but unfortunately, these plans never came to fruition. The assassin was already on the lookout for a victim and preparing for an attack when Celia arrived at the golf club on September 17, 2018. She had just finished a conversation with her mother. The staff, familiar with the notable athlete, informed her that 15 older gentlemen from Des Moines had also arrived and were scheduled to play golf at 8:45. The group was directed to the starting line where the first 4 holes were located. Celia watched them arrive in golf carts and begin their game. A collection of retirees indicated to her to advance and begin her round. Celia complied, using her cart to play the first hole, then advancing directly to number 4 so as not to delay the senior group. The seniors described her as both polite and friendly. Celia then proceeded toward the 7th hole an area less frequented due to its distance from other holes and its border with Squaw Creek Park, which was known for its dense vegetation. Athletes generally avoided this area, as it could sometimes host unauthorized visitors and even aggressive homeless individuals. Unfamiliar with these local nuances, she ventured there nonetheless. Players needing to reach the ninth hole had to cross a bridge via a wide path and navigate through a section of woods. One coach remarked that this area felt quite eerie, akin to Sleepy Hollow. Celia was headed that way later in the morning. Around 10:30 a.m., a group of 15 people approached this location and saw Celia's cart with her belongings still in place, but Celia herself was nowhere in sight. While playing on the field, they noted something unusual. Celia hadn't appeared within 10 minutes, causing concern among the group. Deciding to investigate further, they approached her cart and sought out any sign of Celia. As they drew nearer, they observed her t-shirt, baseball cap, and various personal items scattered in the field. Her phone remained on the cart. It seemed as though some items might have accidentally fallen from her pocket. However, why her t-shirt was lying around and why she had abandoned her phone remained unclear. They searched around, but there was no one in. Next, they the club management and reported the troubling discovery. The group mentioned they'd seen a pretty blonde girl playing golf earlier, but now she was gone and her stuff was still there. The staff who arrived recognized it was Celia and started looking for her. In less than half an hour, they found a body floating in the pond near the ninth hole. That's when called the police. Once they retrieved the body from the water, officers identified her. It was Celia Barkin, the reigning European champion. Celia had been stabbed several times in both the neck and torso. A search dog immediately picked up a trail and led officers to a tent in a wooded area of Squaw Creek Park. However, the tent was empty, with blood inside. The police thought a homeless man might have attacked Celia and began searching for him. Just as they were searching near the tent, a man approached them saying he lived there and wanted to get his tent. His name was Colin Richards. He was also 22 years old like Celia, but their lives were worlds apart. Officers quickly realized he might be involved in the murder. His face was scratched up. Inside his black backpack, they found bloody clothes, a t-shirt and shorts along with clean clothes he had changed into. The search dogs even reacted to his scent. Richards had a deep wound on his left arm that was bleeding. He tried hiding it from officers. Based on this evidence, Colin Richards was taken into custody by police. According to him, before law enforcement arrived, he'd been at a friend's house. Two male friends had brought him back to the park to get his tent, and when he got there, he saw police. Richards denied any involvement in the crime and stated he had never met Celia. He claimed the scratches on his face were from branches encountered while walking through wooded areas. Colin was already known to police due to his abuse of illegal substances, alcohol, and mental health problems. He became after he was released from prison 3 months prior to the murder. Colin had served about 7 months in jail for burglary and had previously been convicted several times for offenses, demonstrating a long history of legal troubles. Growing up in a dysfunctional family, Colin had been familiar to law enforcement since his teenage years. Detectives interviewed 3 men who were acquaintances of Colin. One of the homeless men shared a tent with him, while the other 2 provided him a ride from his home to the park. The owner of the house allowed Colin to wash and change his clothes because he was disheveled, covered in mud, blood, sand, and water. After cleaning up and changing clothes, Colin left with his bloody garments in a black backpack to run to the park for his tent. According to these men, Colin was acting unusually that day, extremely nervous and in a hurry. He did not explain why he needed to leave so suddenly, but merely said he had badly cut himself and soiled his clothes. Another homeless man living with him mentioned that Colin always carried a serrated knife used for domestic purposes. Just a day before the murder, Colin had expressed a desire to rape and kill someone. However, this statement wasn't taken seriously by his friend. Consequently, Colin was charged with first-degree murder immediately after Celia's body was discovered. Investigators believed the crime was premeditated. They thought he planned to kill someone and was actively searching for a victim that day. The judge set bail at $5 million. However, lacking such funds, Colin remained in custody awaiting trial. Meanwhile, Celia's family in Spain remained unaware of these tragic events, but grew increasingly worried as she hadn't returned their calls or messages. Police officers alongside Ames tried reaching out to their colleagues in Point San Miguel and embassy personnel in Madrid to inform Celia's family about the terrible news. However, since it was past midnight in Spain, there was no one available at work or answering the phone. The coach had to make the most difficult phone call of his life. After several hours with no updates, the parents learned that their daughter had been brutally. Later, a serrated knife was discovered in a wooded area containing fingerprints and DNA of the homeless man. Additionally, blood under the victim's fingernails contained particles of Colin's skin, demonstrating that these scratches were inflicted by the deceased rather than by branches. Initially, the homeless man denied any guilt. However, under pressure from substantial evidence, he confessed to his actions. He stated that he had consumed substances that day and was not thinking clearly. While walking through the woods, he saw a young girl who was alone and decided she would be an easy target. Colin had never met or known her before. Celia was an unfortunate victim of his violent attack. Iowa abolished the death penalty in 1965. Thus, he faced a maximum sentence of life imprisonment without parole. At his trial, Colin's family provided an account of his life. His parents were never married or living together when he was born. For the first 10 years of his life, Colin lived with his father, who raised him strictly and often sent him to bed alone while frequenting bars himself. His grandparents cared for him during this period until his mother contested custody and brought him to live with her after marrying another man and having 2 more children. They resided in the countryside because it seemed more peaceful there. The household maintained strict discipline, and Colin's room was always spotless, a point which led family members to joke that he should join the army. Colin performed well academically, but began experiencing behavioral problems as a teenager after reconnecting with his alcoholic father. Despite attempts by his father to re-educate him, Colin did not heed advice and was ultimately kicked out of their home at age 15. From there, he joined poor company, dropped out of school, and became addicted to alcohol as well as other substances. When Colin was 18, he had a girlfriend who was twice his age. In May 2015, he was arrested for domestic violence. He was found and sentenced to 60 days in jail. Another time, when was accused of shoplifting, he threatened to return and shoot up the place. Cole's life spiraled out of control, but no one seemed to notice. In the 2 years that followed the domestic violence case, he was repeatedly arrested for theft, harassment, and attempted burglary. He was sent to undergo behavioral intervention courses, which didn't help. In November 2017, Colin was incarcerated at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility for 2 years for burglary, as well as a probation violation. Despite disciplinary problems, including fights with other inmates, he was released on parole after just 7 months in June 2018 because the prison was running out of space. Only 3 months later, he killed Celia. After leaving prison, Colin was met by his mother and stepfather with whom he lived. They resumed their relationship and corresponded while Colin was behind bars. His parents believed in him and gave him a chance for a normal life, taking his word that he would not use illegal substances and cease communicating with old friends from bad company. However, 2 weeks later, he was kicked out of his home for not keeping his promise. Colin headed to Ames, which was an hour away from his home. For a while, he found refuge in the city's only homeless shelter, but there weren't enough beds. He asked his mother for help, and she bought him a tent. In his new city, Colin quickly came to the attention of the Ames Police Department. On June 29th, he was arrested for public drunkenness. On August 11th, police received a complaint from a Target store that Colin and another homeless man were camping in an open lot behind the store and were chased away. They then camped in Squaw Creek Park so as not to disturb anyone else. Colin stated that the police permitted them to camp there, but this is contradicted by the police, who assert that overnight camping in the park is prohibited and no one advised him to break the law. On September 2nd, just 15 days before Celia's murder, police responded to a call at Burger where Colin had threatened customers with his knife. Despite this, he was released. On September 8th, his mother and stepfather came to Ames to celebrate Colin's 22nd birthday. They took him to dinner and then to the laundromat to wash his clothes. His mother was concerned about his behavior. Colin was uncommunicative and distant, giving brief, one-word responses to their questions. After they dropped him off at a tent in the park where he was living with another homeless man, they drove home. At that point, Colin confessed to his friend that he wanted to rape and kill a woman. Tragically, Celia was found dead the next morning, though she had not been raped. Police believe he did not have enough time. Colin's parents said it was his own fault. They tried to help him, but could not change his path. Consequently, Colin received a life sentence without parole on August 23, 2019. He's currently serving his sentence at Story County Jail in Nevada, Iowa. The entire town of Ames mourned Celia's death. Thousands gathered for a candlelight ceremony to honor the talented athlete. Her family was devastated by the news of her murder and outraged that someone who had achieved nothing and aspired to nothing had so cruelly taken her life. Colin showed no regard for Celia's life. He chose her randomly and killed her because of a violent impulse. The family of the deceased found some solace in the verdict and were relieved that the perpetrator was apprehended quickly and prevented from harming anyone else again. They only wished they hadn't let their daughter go so far away, even though it was her dream. Statistically, the U.S. is not safe. The per capita murder rate in the U.S. is 26 times higher than in Spain. In their small town in Spain, the last murder was 100 years ago. All to blame, the family believes, is the widespread availability of illegal substances, which are literally at every turn. This has led to an increase in violence. Her parents have kept Celia's room exactly as she left it, with one notable addition: an engineering degree posthumously awarded by the state of Iowa. They often stroll through the local golf club and remember when their daughter took her first steps in the sport. Here, the community of Ames, including the university administration and students, were outraged by this crime. Particularly concerning was that the golf course bordered a wooded area and had no fencing. As a result of this negligence by the golf club, the girl's life was put in danger. This was not the first murder case in that neighborhood. Back in 2008, there was a stabbing incident where one man was killed and a homeless assailant was found guilty of murder. It remains unknown if measures were subsequently taken by the golf club to ensure player safety on holes 7 and N. After Celia's death, her boyfriend Carlos could not stay in a city where everything reminded him of her. Carlos moved to Florida, and his further fate is unknown. Celia's brother experienced considerable stress following her death and lost significant weight. After receiving a law degree, he decided to join the police force to help others, a path encouraged by his sister, who had always hinted at his purpose in life. The state of Delaware was left reeling by these events. Madison Sparrow headed out to meet her friends for ice cream on October 2, 2020, but she never returned home. Her mother immediately alerted the police. Thanks to the swift actions of the officers, disturbing details began to emerge. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, USA. She was the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige, and had two sisters, Molly and Wendelin. Although not much is known about her family, we do know Wendelin was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, from Richard's previous relationship. Over time, they settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware, the setting for this story. Madison's younger sister Molly was born on October 5, 2010. She quickly became Madison's best friend. With a deep affection for children, Madison was the eldest among 8 cousins who all cherished her dearly. She never missed a chance to play with them, or put on enchanting performances that everyone found delightful. Her laughter was truly infectious. She had a cheerful spirit that could light up any room. Yet there were moments when Madison would become pensive and dreamy. Her father shared that even from a young age, she showed wisdom beyond her years. She observed and reflected carefully before reacting. Madison's affectionate nature extended to her hugs. They could lift anyone's spirits instantly. Both friends and family saw her as deeply loyal and always considerate about their well-being. Madison's curiosity stayed with her throughout her childhood. She loved learning and experimenting, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, a global youth organization for girls. By the fall of 2012, existing Girl Scout troops were fully occupied, so her mom stepped up as their first troop leader. Madison, at the age of 9, entered the Brownies section, tailored for girls aged 7 to 10. Over the years, Madison distinguished herself as a cookie seller and earned several badges marking her exceptional performance in various duties. Throughout almost 10 in the Girl Scouts organization, she developed strong friendships. Later, driven by a desire to work with other young people and create a positive impact, she volunteered to assist in her sister Molly's troop. Madison was warm-hearted and committed to serving God and her country. She always lent a helping hand while adhering to the principles of the Girl Scouts. Like any young girl, she delighted in having fun. Even during her teenage years, she was known as the Queen of Pranks and loved planning parties with friends. Whether it was movie nights or makeovers that included manicures and pedicures, she could stay up all night but often struggled to wake up before 2 p.m. the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met another central figure in this story, Anuka Stalinsky. Anuka was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. The two quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Anuka is limited, but we know her parents were Robert Stalinsky and Robin Kars. As of 2004, they lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. Madison and Anuka moved on to middle school together after completing elementary school. There they made new friends, including Noah Sharp, a fellow Newark native born on August 23, 2001. Details about Noah's background are limited too. However, it's known his mother Nikki Sharp had 2 other children, David and Brianna. The trio, Madison, Anuka, and Noah, would often go out together for ice cream or take long walks through the city's green spaces. When Noah and Madison crossed paths, mutual attraction sparked between them, and within a few months, a teenage romance blossomed. Initially, they were head over heels in love. However, in early 2020, after being together for just over a year, Madison decided to end the relationship without giving any apparent reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends. Nonetheless, Noah was heartbroken as he still deeply loved her. During this period, Anuka became a trusted confidant for Noah. They started seeing each other more frequently and texting almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, with time he began dating Anuka. Despite his new relationship with Anuka, Noah did not lose contact with Madison. On her 17th birthday on September 12, 2020, he even visited her and brought a gift. That day, Madison's mother noticed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Anuka learned about this meeting, she became consumed with jealousy. She couldn't accept that her beloved continued to be friends with his ex-girlfriend. Likewise, Noah's resentment turned into anger. He wanted Madison to feel the same pain he was enduring. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Anuka and Noah began planning how to end Madison's life. Through text messages, FaceTime calls, and in-person meetings, they exchanged chilling ideas about possible weapons and methods for disposing of the body once the crime was committed. The messages they sent each other indicated their intention to make Madison suffer. Anuka suggested several options, including using a knife to inflict a fatal wound to the heart. They also discussed using a shotgun or perhaps a baseball bat. However, according to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of using a shotgun since it would produce too much noise. Although Noah wasn't very confident initially, They eventually decided on using a blunt object during these discussions. They also performed calculations to determine how many bricks would be necessary to prevent Madison's body from floating if they decided to dispose of her in the water. When doubts arose, they mentioned that another option was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find shovels. In the end, they devised what they believed to be the perfect plan. Madison loved ice cream almost as much as she loved Halloween. Her cheerful spirit eagerly awaited October every year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Anuka knew Madison's taste well and took advantage of this. On Friday, October 2nd, 2020, she called Madison and invited her out for ice cream and to spend the day together. Madison immediately agreed because she hadn't spoken to her friend for a long time and wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was in 3 days. On that day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, and a blue sweatshirt with the inscription New Jersey. She finished her look with white ghost-shaped earrings. Normally, she didn't wear much jewelry, especially earrings, but with Halloween approaching, she decided these ghost earrings would be perfect. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to Heather, saying she would see her later, and left. Although there were no actual ghosts in this story, what happened next was far scarier. It was the last time her mother saw her alive. The following hours, days, weeks, and years turned into a true nightmare for the Sparrow family, her friends, and the residents of Newark. Several hours later, Heather began receiving insulting text messages from Madison's phone number, alongside messages implying that Madison had left the country. Heather initially thought it was a joke and even replied wishing her daughter luck in her endeavors, while joking that she had forgotten her passport in the safe. However, no response came back, even when Heather called Madison's phone. Heather became increasingly concerned when there was still no answer, while she was out with Molly, taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons. The lack of response began to seriously worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, aware that they were supposed to meet later in the day. Upon answering, Annika burst into tears, explaining that Madison had insulted her and that she dropped her off near a store. Anuka then suggested contacting Noah, but he wasn't responding either. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to continue trying to reach him. The three of them, however, no new information surfaced. Disheartened, Heather opted to return home. On her way back, she received several messages from her daughter's friends who had also received unusual SMS messages and were keen to understand what was happening. Once she arrived home and searched for any clues, Heather found nothing that indicated her daughter had run away. Even the money given to her for her birthday, her clothes, and her credit card were still in her room. These strange messages made little sense. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without taking essential items like a bag with clothes and money. At approximately 8:30 p.m., when Madison failed to come home, Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite continuous efforts to connect with people, all attempts were fruitless. Upon learning of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. She also notified Madison's father, residing in Colorado, who promptly shared information on social media appealing for assistance in locating his daughter. On the next day, Saturday, October 3rd, 2020, the Delaware State Police issued a golden alert for 17-year-old Madison. This alert triggers all required procedures for searching for a missing person within Delaware. Over 2 days, police search teams, family members, and numerous friends scoured the farmlands near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen alive. The media also spread information about the search, urging people to provide any details they might have related to Madison's whereabouts. Delaware State Police simultaneously started questioning Madison's friends, and all evidence pointed to her ex-boyfriend. According to some sources, the girl headed to a wooded area in Newark behind an elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she disappeared. Detectives detained and interrogated the young man for almost 9 hours from October 4th through 5th, presenting several conflicting scenarios and insisting he didn't know what had happened. Eventually, The barrier of silence broke, shocking everyone. The young man confessed not only to taking Madison's life, but also claimed that Annika was his accomplice. Noah informed police that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of her relationship with him. He also elaborated on how deeply he had been hurt by his breakup with Madison. Noah recounted driving Madison to the wooded area behind the elementary school. As they walked along a trail, he hid behind bushes with an aluminum baseball bat in hand. He told officers how Madison was happy to spend time with her friend and unsuspecting of the danger ahead. Suddenly emerging from hiding, Noah struck her on the head twice with great force. He admitted that he put all his strength into the second blow and said that it was at that moment he snapped after months of uncontrollable anger towards her for breaking his heart. Unable to contain himself, he continued delivering more blows to her body. Following the assault on Madison, Noah and Annika transported her body using Anna's car to a site beneath a bridge near the intersection of I-95 and a Delaware State Road, approximately 15 minutes away from the crime scene and close to a warehouse. Upon reaching this location, they tried to submerge her body in the river, but failed. Instead, they opted to conceal it in a shallow grave they dug at the same spot. Using details provided by Noah, investigators meticulously searched the designated area. There, they unearthed an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon bearing traces of blood. The crime scene yielded clothing worn by Madison when she left home, with some articles showing evidence of scorching. Subsequently, they guided law enforcement to a wooded area near the junction of I-95 and Delaware State Road. It was here that he and his accomplice had clandestinely interred the body on Monday, October 5, 2020. Corporal Heather Piper announced the finding of the body, leaving Madison's family, friends, and the entire community in disbelief. A few days later, on Friday, October 9th, hundreds of individuals gathered at the high school football field to honor and remember the victim. The autopsy revealed that Madison's death resulted from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found Noah's and Anna's DNA in physical evidence collected both at the crime scene and where the body was discovered. Noah faced charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime, and first-degree conspiracy. He was placed in a correctional facility with bail set at $1 million. On Monday, November 16, 2020, over a month after the tragic event and following the processing of necessary evidence, 17-year-old Anna was also arrested. Her arrest occurred after a grand jury in Newcastle County indicted her on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family was in disarray. Heather repeatedly stated that a rational reason for why her daughter's life was taken would never be found. Her main plea for justice was that these criminals would never again be able to harm others or themselves. Although Noah admitted to detectives that he committed the crime during an official court indictment, he did not plead guilty. This led to speculation that his defense might argue mental instability, a common tactic lawyers sometimes use to justify their clients' actions. This case appeared to be no exception. During a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that at the time of the murder, Noah was undergoing treatment for potential schizophrenia under the care of a psychiatrist. The lawyer also mentioned that Noah had sustained an injury in Chester County, Pennsylvania, approximately 3 weeks prior to the crime. She elaborated that due to this head injury, her client experienced gaps in memory and other issues. However, she did not specify the cause or severity of the injury. In May 2021, Annika pleaded guilty to charges of first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her lawyers negotiated a deal with prosecutors, wherein she agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intent to end Madison's life. According to court documents, several individuals, including those close to the victim, informed the police about Noah's alleged alter ego, a second personality. Prosecutors contended that Noah had spread this information as part of a premeditated plan to murder Madison and later used this narrative in court. After 2 years of awaiting justice, the trial began on October 20th, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called by Deputy Attorneys General Matt Foley and JNDS. The courtroom displayed hours of video recordings of Noah's interrogations with state police detectives. The audience listened to Noah's altering narratives until he ultimately confessed. The defense challenged this evidence by emphasizing that their client was interrogated for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that detectives manipulated the interrogation process. Noah received guidance on what to say and was subjected to pressure, but it was clear to everyone that this was simply a desperate attempt to justify the actions of the accused by any available means. The prosecution also presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, detailing their plan for the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense tried to convince the court that someone else had control over Noah's device and that he wasn't the one messaging Annika. Noah's mother and brother were called to testify sequentially, giving conflicting accounts several times. Nikki stated that her son was not wet when he returned home on the evening of October 2nd, while David claimed his brother was wet and looked like he'd been in a swamp. Nikki mentioned that shortly after Noah's arrival, Anuka entered the house calmly. In contrast, David said she entered angrily, slamming the door. Prosecutor Matt Frawley asked Nikki if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him. She replied no. However, prosecutors played an audio recording of a phone call between Noah and his mother from a month before the trial, where they discussed surveillance footage from an elementary school. In the conversation, Noah mentioned his face wasn't visible in the video, where he and Anuka were seen near the elementary school about an hour before Madison's murder. Nikki reacted with relief. The video showed an African American of similar height and build as Noah carrying a baseball bat and walking into woods with a girl. The defense questioned relatives about head injuries Noah allegedly suffered on September 13, 2020, and another unconfirmed injury from a bicycle fall just hours before police interrogations on October 4th. Noah's lawyers suggested these injuries might have caused dissociative amnesia in their attempt to justify his statements. Faced with the claim he made to the police, the prosecutors questioned whether the injury was part of a conspiracy to murder Madison. The defense contested this point somewhat uncertainly. Annika confirmed all the prosecution's arguments during her 3-hour testimony in court. In her account, she calmly explained how Noah convinced her that Madison was speaking ill of her behind her back. Friends and relatives of the victim, however, emphasized that Madison never spoke negatively about her friends. After 8 days of court sessions and presenting over 250 pieces of evidence, the jury took only 3 hours to reach a final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When the jury's decision was announced, Noah and his mother showed no emotion. Noah simply turned and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried in relief. Before leaving the courtroom, Heather Madison's mother uttered a phrase her daughter had used before: "Choose light, not darkness. Love conquers all." She also expressed gratitude, saying, "We want to thank our friends and family. This has been a 2-year process, and we couldn't have done this without their love and constant support." She continued by thanking the community and specifically Newark Charter School and its administration and families. Additionally, she appreciated those who supported the Love Wins 5K over the past 2 years and backed the Madison Sparrow Memorial Scholarship aimed at aiding future educators. Regarding Annika, when Noah's guilty verdict was announced, prosecutors stated that according to Delaware state law, she would be recommended a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 30 years, as she was a minor at the time of the crime. On March 19, 2014, an emergency call was made to the police in Guamuchil, located in the state of Sinaloa, Mexico. The caller's voice was broken and pleading for help for his daughter. Officers rushed to a house in the Las Fuentes area. When they arrived, they saw the front doors wide open. Inside, upstairs, they found a man and his younger daughter, who was about 10 years, both crying inconsolably. The man led the police to a room where they found the lifeless body of a 16-year-old girl with over 60 wounds. This tragic news spread quickly through the city and shocked its residents. Nobody could comprehend who could take the life of such a young girl. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in Guamuchil, Sinaloa. She was the second child of Idalia Alvarez and Hugo Baez. Her older brother was Omar. Later, they were joined by their younger sibling, Aid. During her childhood, Anel faced no particular problems. Although initially reserved, she grew to be self-assured with grace and charm. Her father worked as a tailor, and the family enjoyed prosperity and closeness. However, this happiness ended when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to mature quickly to care for her. Following a tough battle with illness, Idalia passed away in 2012. The family was devastated but did not waver. They supported each other through grief and tried to make life as comfortable as possible. The tragedy brought Anel closer to her sister. They shared everything, both sadness and difficulties, together. Despite these challenges, Anel remained cheerful and friendly with a passion for dancing and music. As she transitioned to high school, she emerged as an ideal daughter, managing household chores, looking after her younger sister, and maintaining good grades. One of her favorite activities was cooking for her family. Her desserts were especially popular. Anel also overcame shyness and became one of the most well-liked girls in school. She even formed a musical group where she took on the role of a singer, developing a fondness for the ballad Amor Eterno. Around the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Andy Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, drawing admiration from everyone around and being considered the most popular girls in school. Their bond through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Andy expressing her joy about their friendship. She expressed gratitude to God for the opportunity to be close to her, and even wrote that Andy had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. For a while, everything was wonderful, but over time, things changed. Despite being the same age, their personalities turned out to be completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Andy lived in an unstable environment and became increasingly involved in what was known as narco culture. This urban community was also known in Mexico as Buchona. Andy was consistently present at events featuring musicians of this kind, such as the concert of the band Caliber 50 during the closing of the carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. The girl also held very clear political stances. On one occasion, she shared on her social media that she participated in a march supporting Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera. On her social media page, she wrote, "March for the liberation of El Chapo. We must join this great cause," which was accompanied by a photo. Unlike her friend, Anel typically didn't express her ideology on social media and didn't share the views supported by Andy. As a result, the distance between them grew larger. In 2014, both entered Guamuchil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but hardly communicated with each other. Each created her own group of friends. Anel started hanging out with Melissa Karim Manuel and Maria Jose, friends who led similar lifestyles to hers and followed her everywhere and admired her deeply. Maria Jose, who had known Anel since elementary school, considered Anel the mother of their entire group and assumed this role, always taking care of everyone. Despite maintaining a polite and orderly demeanor, she kept her distance from Randy and never informed her father or siblings about their dispute. Around this time, Randy's social media behavior became erratic. On her page, she started posting negative and troubling messages. For instance, some posts were highly alarming, mentioning things like pregnant 13-year-old girls and year-old girls taking active substances. Other posts were quite disturbing, such as, "My mom is upset that I killed my ex and buried him in my garden," or "Lucky the living dead she is envied." Initially, these posts seemed nonsensical. Randy often drew them from forums or songs. However, over time, her messages began to take on a more threatening tone. On February 5th, 2014, she wrote, "I'm going to bury you by the end of this year." Then, on February 23rd of the same month, she posted, "I may seem very calm, but in my head I've killed you at least 3 times. And in the end, my mind is filled with new ideas every day." A few days later, Randy wrote, "Thank God no one hears my thoughts and everything will definitely happen tomorrow." The unsettling messages continued to appear with increasing frequency. On March 3rd, she posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you I won't tell her anything then, but know that I have already mentally destroyed you." The last post was dated March 16th. She wrote, "This seriously drives me to despair." No one within her social circle knew who the threats were aimed at. However, rumors began circulating at school. Many speculated that Randy was upset with Annelle because they were no longer friends. Some even accused Randy of being jealous of Annelle since everyone adored her. Despite this turmoil, Annelle appeared unfazed by what Randy was posting on social media. Annelle celebrated her birthday with a large party where she wore a beautiful pink dress and was undoubtedly the star of the evening. Everything in her life seemed perfect until her unexpected absence on March 19th raised concerns among her family. Hugo received a call from the school attended by his younger daughter, informing him that Annelle had not come to pick her up as usual. Initially, Hugo wasn't overly concerned. He thought Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle to ensure everything was okay, but she didn't answer. He assumed she was still sleeping. After picking his daughter, Hugo tried to contact Annelle again. She didn't respond. He repeatedly called her number with no success, and his worry deepened. Hugo headed home in the Los Fuentes area. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was wide open. Entering the main living room, father and daughter saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. They shouted Annelle's name and searched for her throughout the house. She did not respond and couldn't be found anywhere. Finally, Hugo reached her room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, raising his concern further. He knocked several times without getting a response from Annelle. Hugo then broke down the door. What he saw took his breath away. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with numerous wounds and blood stains around her. He immediately called the police, who soon arrived at the scene. Seeing the crime scene, officers initially thought that a very strong person or group had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, they were minimal. It was evident someone had tried to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, the forensic expert determined that Annelle had sustained 65 stab wounds in total. Officers were convinced that this attack was carried out by someone harboring strong hatred toward her. Moreover, since neither doors nor windows were forced open, detectives believed Annelle knew her assailant and let them into the house willingly. They speculated she might have arranged to meet with this person that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone, they found nothing suggesting such an arrangement. No invitations or planned visits were evident on her phone records. Initially, Hugo wasn't too concerned. He figured Annelle might have overslept or was with friends. After school, he went to pick up his daughter. The way, Hugo decided to call Annelle just to check in, but there was no answer. Thought she might still be sleeping. After picking up his daughter, he tried contacting Annelle again, but there was still no response. Hugo called repeatedly with no success. His concern grew. Heading home to their place in Los Fuentes, he noticed the front door was wide open. Inside, some items had been moved around. It looked like a robbery might have taken place. Father and daughter started calling out for Annelle and searched the house frantically. There was no response from her, and she wasn't anywhere to be found. When Hugo reached her room, he found the door locked, which raised his alarm even more. He knocked several times without any reply. Eventually, Hugo broke down the door. What he saw left him breathless. Annelle's lifeless body lay on the floor with multiple wounds and bloodstains nearby. He immediately called the police, who arrived promptly at the scene. Observing the crime scene initially led officers to think that someone very strong, or possibly a group, had committed the crime. Although there were blood stains in the room, minimal ones, it appeared that an attempt had been made to clean them up. Later during the autopsy, a forensic expert determined that Anel had sustained 65 stab wounds. Officers began believing that someone with intense hatred towards her carried out the attack. There were no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows remained intact, suggesting that Anel knew her assailant and let them in willingly. They even speculated whether she had arranged to meet someone that day. However, upon checking her mobile phone records, they found nothing indicating an invite to anyone to her home that day. It appeared to be a random encounter since there were no surveillance cameras in the vicinity. Officers decided to interview the neighbors. A few of them reported seeing a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements helped narrow down the pool of suspects, and investigators were no longer looking for a man or a group of people. Following this, officers began questioning Anel's close circle. All relatives had solid alibis, asserting that the girl had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives took an interest in a post on Randy's social media in which she expressed shock at Anel's death. Some people conveyed their condolences, but others started pointing fingers at Randy as the murderer. They flooded the post with comments accusing her and claiming she was guilty of the crime. Randy deleted her account, but it was already too late. Police called several of Anel's friends to ask about the connection between the two girls. All of them mentioned that they had grown apart, and it was evident that Randy envied Anel because she was more popular. After these interviews, detectives visited Randy's social media profiles and found numerous threatening posts she had written a few months earlier. But that wasn't all. Just hours after Anel's death, Randy wrote, "I'm a fool. Oh my God, what have I done?" Although these posts lacked context, everything pointed to Randy as the primary suspect in the crime. This information was kept confidential because officers feared she might flee before they could apprehend her. The agents patiently waited for the right moment. The case drew so much attention that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guamumuil to bid farewell to Anel. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and embraced each other, unable to believe such a young girl had left life behind. Despite the large crowd, two people stood out with their presence. As soon as the girls entered the room, they began chatting and eating ice cream. A few minutes later, Andy suggested watching a movie. She then mentioned she was going to the bathroom, asked them not to pause the movie. However, instead of going to the bathroom, Andy went downstairs to the kitchen. She picked up a sharp knife and returned to the room, concealing it under her clothes. She noticed that Nell was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Seizing this opportunity, Andy took out the knife and started attacking her. Nell attempted to defend herself by scratching, pushing, and punching, but couldn't overpower Andy. Nell lost too much blood and eventually fell lifeless to the floor, becoming a victim of a heinous crime. Andy began showing signs of impatience, aware that she needed to act quickly as Nell's family would return home soon. She used all available rags to try cleaning up the blood, but could only manage to wipe away part of it due to its large amount. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, and put on clothes taken from Nell's wardrobe. Afterward, she closed the door to the room, leaving her best friend's body inside, and ran out of the house, leaving the front door ajar. When Anel's relatives heard this account, they became furious. They knew that the story about the photograph was a lie. Anel was not capable of such an act. It didn't align with her character. Furthermore, Anel's friends claimed they had never seen that photograph before. They noted that since both girls were so popular, it would have been impossible for such a photo not to have spread, and someone would have surely downloaded it by now. All signs pointed toward envy as being the actual motive for this crime. However, at this point in time, motive no longer mattered because Andy had become the sole suspect in this crime and was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. 4 officers escorted Andy into juvenile court proceedings at prosecutors' offices specializing in cases involving minors. After an hour-and-a-half hearing session took place, Andy was found guilty. Although it was clear that she had devised a premeditated plan and the murder was intentional, given that she was 6 years old, she received sentence of 7 years imprisonment. She was transferred to the juvenile detention center in Kakan, and Nell's family believed justice had been achieved and thought was done. However, they were gravely mistaken. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Kakan, which was incorrect since the crime occurred within Los Mochis' jurisdiction. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time in the proper jurisdiction. Despite the swift process, the verdict remained unchanged. This decision sparked widespread outrage among the public. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media with posters calling for justice for Anel. Several polls were conducted with over 5 million users believing Aren's sentence was unjust. Many felt she deserved a much longer prison term. The trial took place again, and once more, the girl received a 7-year imprisonment sentence. Hugo addressed journalists expressing his dissatisfaction. He appreciated that the sentence wasn't reduced, but felt Randy's age shouldn't have shielded her from a longer term. He hoped she would at least serve the full sentence, but even that didn't happen. On July 6, 2016, her sentence got reduced to 5 years of imprisonment. Moreover, it was also decided at this hearing that with good behavior, she could be released earlier. State police officers had to close the courthouse gates as numerous journalists wanted photographs of her. This case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo wasn't informed about this hearing, which caused him significant outrage, and from this point onward, circumstances became even worse. On Friday, September 23, 2017, another hearing analyzed Ari's behavior in connection with reforms in federal juvenile justice law. The girl was released after serving only 3.5 years out of her initial sentence. Leaving court, Hugo expressed extreme dissatisfaction. He felt he had witnessed a great injustice. He regretted that legislative reforms appeared to benefit offenders rather than victims. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Trish Willoughby. February 23, 1991. Dan Willoughby, a dedicated father, is driving back to the family's beach house with his kids. Their faces radiate excitement from their recent trip to the museum, eager to share their adventures with their mother Trish. As they enter their home, his 10-year-old daughter rushes ahead, bursting into the bedroom to recount their day to her mother. However, her excitement turns to shock as she discovers Trish Willoughby, her mother, unconscious on the bed amidst signs of a violent struggle. Trish had been brutally attacked, stabbed, bludgeoned, and strangled. A chilling scene with a butter knife stuck to her temple and her head wrapped in a bloody towel. A sight that would remain etched in their memories forever. Despite the horrific scene, Trish is still alive, moaning in pain. The family's vacation has spiraled into a living nightmare. A nearby doctor rushes to aid, but there is little he can do for the profusely bleeding woman. Trish is rushed to the hospital, but tragically succumbs to her wounds. Dan, consumed by grief, informs the authorities that $400 and Trish's 2 valuable rings are missing. The police find the crime scene disarrayed, as if someone had been searching for something, leaving behind a mess with drawers pulled out. They take 7 pictures and seal the scene, promising further investigation. The hotel staff inform the police of a suspicious character spotted near the beach house that afternoon. Questioning Dan, who is frantic and sorrowful, reveals they were a happily married couple on a family vacation. With no more queries, the police are at a loss. Dan is devastated, and he is asking the authorities for permission to bring Trish's body back to the United States for a proper funeral. They were concerned about the potential consequences if news got out, particularly about wealthy foreign tourists being killed in Mexico, if they agreed to send Trish's remains back to her family in Arizona. It is worth noting that no autopsy was performed, which would have been required in a comparable situation if the incident had happened in the United States. The community in Phoenix, Arizona was stunned by the news of Trish's murder. Trish, a successful businesswoman who ran a profitable herbal supplement company with her mother, was highly respected. She was always seen as flawless, cheerful, and never shared her troubles with anyone. She was adored by everyone she met. Trish's body had barely returned when local authorities received many phone calls, with people suggesting foul play was involved and not just a coincidence. Dan seemed to be a man of contradictions. In his community, he was seen as a respectable, church-going, devoted husband known for his generosity, often helping out in the neighborhood and even inviting homeless individuals for meals. However, as the investigation progressed, a different side of Dan started to emerge. The police discovered more about Dan's secret life. His co-workers disclosed that Dan enjoyed partying and drinking alcohol, behaviors that were considered uncharacteristic of a Mormon and contradictory to his public persona. He frequently skipped work, using his time and company funds to meet clients or, as his colleagues claimed, to spend time with a woman named Isoned, under the pretense that she was a client. There was even a joke going around the office that Dan would be seen freshening up in the bathroom, come out smelling of strong cologne, and then breeze through the office stating he was off to see a client. However, everyone knew he was really going away to spend time with Isoned Patino. The police now were curious to know who was this mystery woman. Isoned Patino, a young and exotic woman who had moved to Arizona with her family. When she was 6, she had a turbulent life, moving from bar to bar and from man to man. She met Dan in late 1989 while waiting for a bus, and he stopped in his flashy Jaguar. He flirted with her, joking her for littering when she dropped a candy wrapper on the ground. He offered her a ride, gave her his business card, and playfully suggested a vacation and drinks. It seemed Isoned had found the type of man she was always looking for, a man eager to spoil her, take her to expensive places, and lavish her with attention. Dan had persuaded his wife that he required Spanish lessons to better navigate his business prospects in Mexico. Of course, subsequently, he even presented Isoned to his wife and children as his Spanish tutor. Soon after, he also started taking frequent trips to Mexico, bringing Isoned along. Isoned was described as strikingly beautiful with a fiercely passionate personality. Perhaps it was this passion that fueled their relationship. Dan even kept a photo of Isoned displayed in his office with the words, "To my future husband Dan Willoughby," written on it. It is unclear whether his wife knew about the true nature of their relationship at the time, or if her strong moral beliefs and faith kept her from seeing her husband in a negative light. Dan's close associates were well aware of his relationship with Isoned. He openly talked about his attractive new Spanish tutor, going as far as to claim she was exceptional in bed. In a mere span of weeks, Isoned's world underwent a dramatic change. Dan arranged an apartment for her in close proximity to his residence. He persuaded Trish that it was their moral duty to cover her rent. But as the saying goes, what happens in the dark comes to light. Dan's lavish lifestyle and absences from work eventually caught up with him, and he was fired from his job. Dan Willoughby, who was once a respected member of his community, now depended completely on Trish's income. Despite losing his job, Dan continued to live a luxurious life, all the while having Isoned as his Spanish teacher. His regular absences and extravagant lifestyle, funded by Trish's income, started causing resentment within the family. The previously happy household was now filled with tension and doubt. Trish, who had been supporting the family on her own, was becoming increasingly worried about Dan's unexplained absences. Her concerns were shared by her mother, who started to suspect that something was very wrong. Dan often dropped off the kids at school and then spent the day at Isoned's apartment, clearly doing more than just practicing Spanish. Trish felt more and more uneasy as she couldn't reach Dan all day, even though he was no longer working. She talked to her mother, who advised her to talk to Dan in the fall of 1990. Trish's suspicions reached a breaking point, and she decided to confront the situation head-on by looking for Dan at Isoned's apartment. What she found there changed everything. The front door was unlocked. She walked in and found Dan in Isoned's bedroom hurriedly putting on his shirt. Isoned, upon hearing Trish's voice, quickly hid. A confrontation was inevitable, and Dan knew it. After a brief argument, Trish, still in shock, stormed out with Dan, trying to catch up. Dan spoke to Yesenia, asking her to deny everything if Trish spoke to her and to insist that she was just his Spanish teacher. The next day, Trish confronted Yesenia at the public pool area of the apartment complex. The conversation escalated, voices were raised, but Yesenia denied any romantic involvement with Dan. She even offered to stop tutoring Dan if it was causing problems in their marriage. However, the truth was far from this. Yesenia and Dan continued to see each other, lying to Trish about their relationship. Fast forward to March 1st, 1991, investigators brought Dan in for questioning. During the interrogation, the detectives cautiously brought up the topic of the substantial fortune that Dan would inherit from Trish's successful business and her life insurance policies. A question that, under normal circumstances, might have received a simple answer, but not this time. Dan reacted in a surprising way. His face turned red, his behavior changed, and he seemed visibly upset. He responded with his own question, his voice filled with a mix of fear and anger, asking if he was being considered a suspect. His sudden defensive behavior and agitation raised suspicions for the investigators, indicating that something was amiss. At the same time, the police were searching for Yesenia. They went to her apartment but found movers and suspected that she was planning to leave the country. They found her at a hotel near the airport, just before she was supposed to take a flight. When they searched through her things, they found a social security card belonging to a man named Alfredo Pinto, who had been charged with prostitution in Oregon. So who is Alfredo Pinto? Yesenia then revealed she was, or rather is, Mr. Pinto. Yesenia Patino Gonzalez was born male and had even been wedded to a man named Jack, who also funded her gender reassignment surgery after their marriage. This revelation left investigators even more puzzled because there was no same-sex marriage back then, neither in Mexico nor in the USA. During questioning, Yesenia denied being involved in any plot against Trish. She admitted to being in Mexico partying with friends the weekend that Trish was murdered, but claimed she wasn't aware Dan was there. When confronted about Trish's rings that were found in her wallet, she claimed she got them from a man on the beach. Completely unfazed by these accusations, Yesenia appeared calm and was even flirting with the detective. At one point, she leaned into him and said, "Detective, I know what a man wants." Due to a lack of evidence against her at the time, the police used an existing shoplifting warrant to put her in jail. When Dan was later questioned about Yesenia's gender at birth, he claimed to be completely unaware of her transgender identity. He claimed she had no visible Adam's apple or a deep voice, and she was all woman. Considering the intimate nature of their relationship, this revelation left the investigators stunned. One of them even stated, "You just can't make this stuff up. The truth is far crazier than fiction." Searching for more evidence, the police exhumed Trish's body to conduct an autopsy. The coroner found a bruise on Trish's abdomen and evidence that she had been struck in the head 9 times. She had also been stabbed in the head with a butter knife, and there was ecchymosis, a type of bruising on her body that was compatible with a wound from a right-handed fist. On March 4th, 1991, forensic specialists from the USA worked with Mexican authorities and gained entry to the beach house where an incident occurred. The team found strong evidence pointing to Yesenia. Her fingerprints were prominent at the crime scene, particularly on the back door and a soda bottle. However, no direct forensic proof was found against Dan Willoughby. By the time the forensics and autopsy results were released, Yesenia had already been discharged from jail and had fled to Mexico. The police, in cross-country cooperation, searched for her everywhere. With the help of media exposure, they finally had a lead. In December 1991, someone reported having seen Yesenia working at a bar in Mexico and called Crime Stoppers. She was arrested in a crowded cantina in Mazatlan and agreed to cooperate with the Arizona police. Yesenia was presented with a proposal. If she agreed to be extradited to the USA and testify against Dan in his trial, she would receive a reduced sentence. She accepted this offer. In April 1992, Dan Willoughby's trial started. Yesenia, his Spanish teacher and lover, testified that Dan had talked about killing his wife. She described how he planned to buy a silencer in Mexico, drown Trish while scuba diving, or push her off a cliff at the Grand Canyon. The courtroom was shocked as Yesenia shared details of a dinner they had at a restaurant. In May 1990, Dan said he planned to take someone to Mexico and harm them. He mentioned involving his connections to the mafia in the act. Dan had spoken with Trish and her mother about the future of their business if one of them were to die. He convinced them to accept a buyout plan supported by insurance. Trish had several insurance policies, including a $750,000 policy obtained shortly before her unexpected death. Yesenia revealed that 3 months before the incident, Dan started to meticulously devise his dark scheme. He confided in her that he wanted the satisfaction of killing Trish himself and gave Aya specific instructions on her role. She was to come in after he leaves, mess up the scene to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, tie a rope around Trish's neck, and attack her body with a knife. Then she was to take off with some valuables and money. To prepare for his sinister plan, Dan rented a condo in Rocky Point, somewhat removed from others in the area, and paid in cash. He and Yesenia made 2 trips from Phoenix to Rocky Point Beach to explore the area and go over their plans. Dan arranged for Yin, his brother, to take her to the beach on the day of the crime. On the afternoon that their sinister plot was executed, Dan met Yesenia and her brother on the beach. After a short chat about their plans, Dan returned to the condo. Yesenia left her brother at a park and drove to a spot with a view of the condo. After Dan and the children drove off to the museum, it was her cue to enter the condo through the unlocked back door. Taking the knife from the kitchen, Yesenia went into the bedroom and saw Trish lying unconscious on the bed, soaking in her own blood. Trish was still breathing, each breath making a gurgling sound. Following Dan's plan, Yesenia stabbed and strangled Trish but was unable to kill her. After taking Trish's rings and money and scattering the contents of Trish's purse, Yesenia fled, meeting her brother for the return trip to Arizona. Following the tragic event, Dan initiated a series of actions to divert suspicion. He instructed Yesenia to depart Arizona, leading her to return to Mexico. He convened a gathering of his neighbors, where he refuted any involvement in the incident and discouraged them from engaging with the police. Dan also went to great lengths to cover his tracks. He told Yesenia, his brother, to deceive the police by denying he met him in Mexico. He warned Yesenia's husband, Jack, to stay uninvolved. He contacted his travel agent, asking to erase trip details from the agency's computer system. Dan also asked his former secretary to vouch for his character as a devoted family man should the police come asking questions. He even instructed her to intimidate a former colleague to prevent them from revealing any information about Yesenia to the police. At the time, Dan had provided false information to investigators, claiming that condo guards had spotted 3 individuals of Native American descent in a black pickup truck in the vicinity. It was revealed that Dan was able to claim an older life insurance policy for his wife, but couldn't collect on the policy purchased for the larger buyout agreement between Trish and her mother. Investigators also uncovered a shocking detail. On the day of the incident, statements from his own children revealed that just after leaving the condo, Dan asked them to wait in the car, claiming he had forgotten his passport and would be back in 5 minutes. He stayed in the condo for about 15 minutes, during which his oldest daughter, who wanted to know what was taking her father so long, tried to enter but could not because the front door was locked. It is speculated that this is the time Dan carried out his attack on Trish, and it lined up with Yesenia's testimony. He was next seen by the kids exiting the front door, tucking in a new shirt. During the investigation, the Mexican government cooperated with Arizona officials by allowing them to interview Yesenia and also giving temporary custody of her so she could testify at Dan's trial. In return for her cooperation, Arizona State agreed not to prosecute Yesenia and to try to have her sentence in Mexico reduced. However, when Yesenia was charged by the Mexican authorities and she pleaded guilty, she received the maximum sentence possible: life in prison. Back in Arizona, the grand jury indicted Dan for premeditated first-degree murder and several other offenses such as armed robbery, obstructing a criminal investigation, filing a fraudulent insurance claim, etc. Considering everything presented at the trial and the jury's indictment on all counts, the judge handed down the maximum sentence. Dan was sentenced to death. However, 3 years after the initial trial, in September 1995, Yesenia wrote a letter to the American judge claiming that she alone was responsible for Trish's demise and that Dan was innocent. Reviewing the forensics of the case, the blood forensics told a different story. 2 distinct types of blood splatters were found on the sheets of the crime scene, suggesting that the victim was attacked twice within around 10 minutes. This corroborated Yesenia's first confession. She did not act alone and entered the condo after Dan had already attacked Trish. In November 1999, Dan's conviction was overturned and the death penalty was taken off the table. In the second trial, prosecutors gave him 2 consecutive life sentences. Dan maintains his innocence to this day. The case of Dan Willoughby is a chilling reminder of the depths to which human beings can sink when driven by greed and jealousy. Dan had it all: a loving family, a thriving career, financial success, and a great future. Yet he threw it away, chasing his dark temptations and causing profound suffering to the one he swore to love and protect. Indeed, Trish's final moments were tragically marked by suffering at the hands of those she had generously provided for. Despite her kindness and support, she was betrayed by the very people she cared for. This stark reality serves as a sobering reminder of the depths of human betrayal. Yet, in remembering Trish, we must honor her strength, resilience, and unwavering faith. May she rest in peace. The story of Trish, Dan, and Yesenia serves as a grim reminder of the dark side of human nature. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. In a heart-wrenching tale of tragedy, we meet Eva Blanco Puig, a young soul taken too soon at just 16 years old. For 18 agonizing years, her story remained shrouded in darkness until the truth, once elusive, finally surfaced through DNA samples, unmasking the face of the perpetrator. For 18 long years, the questions haunted those who loved her. Who could do such a thing? Why was justice so elusive? But the memory of Eva's radiant spirit never faded, as it was for Eva etched in the hearts of those she left behind. And thus, the relentless pursuit of justice for their loved one never ceased. Eva Blanco Puig was born on February 17, 1981, in Spain to Manuel Blanco and Olga Puig. By 1997, the couple was living a quiet and peaceful life, having already settled in Aldehuela, a small municipality of Madrid that was well away from all the bustle of the capital, together with their 3 daughters, Eva, Rebecca, and Maria. Eva, among her closest companions and beloved kin, was often portrayed as a rather quiet girl, yet exuded an enchanting air of mirth and dependability, and was an absolute delight to be around. She also thrived in the realm of athletic pursuits, with her passion for sports illuminating her days with unbridled joy. At school, she found herself embraced by a multitude of admirers for her magnetic charisma and warm-hearted nature that knew no bounds. Eva always set a good example for her younger sisters, and being a responsible girl, she did not give her parents great displeasure as she complied with all the rules that they dictated, with one of them being the curfew that they had always set for her. However, on this fateful day, things did not go as planned. On the afternoon of April 19th, Eva and her friends were playing tennis, enjoying the carefree moments that only youth could offer. But little did they know that this seemingly ordinary afternoon would take a dark and harrowing turn. As the sun dipped below the horizon, being a Saturday, they decided to go to a local disco to cherish their unbreakable bonds of friendship and spend more time with each other, extending it into the late night. Eva had already asked her mother for permission to extend her curfew slightly, and Olga, seeing that her daughter had always been responsible, rewarded her as they agreed that by midnight she should already be back home. The clock struck 11:30 p.m., and little by little, the group bid their farewells, heading home. Among them was Blanco, whose journey home would unfortunately lead her into the shadows of mystery. Accompanied by her friend, Eva ventured towards a vacant lot that served as a shortcut to her home. It was a path she had walked countless times before, but destiny had something else in store for her. At around 11:45 p.m., they parted ways as Blanco took her familiar path through the dark, vacant lot, with no inkling that it would be their last goodbye. As midnight approached, Eva's mother grew restless, her heart burdening with worry as her daughter failed to arrive home. She reached out to Eva's friends, hoping for any clue to her whereabouts, only to be told that everyone had already parted ways, and Eva should have already arrived at home by then. This rang her alarm bells as she alerted her husband, who was a tow truck driver. He then began searching for Eva in the town, together with his nephew, a local police officer, and also with the help of the father of one of Eva's friends. When the clock struck 1 a.m., Blanco's parents reported her disappearance at the local civil guard station. But to their dismay, the officers showed little concern for filing a disappearance report for someone missing just a little over an hour. The guard at the door callously dismissed the seriousness of the situation, claiming that children of her age were all on drugs, and she was probably lying in a doorway or on some sidewalk, clearly implying she was not worth that much attention to them. In the darkness of the night, Blanco's father made a harrowing journey to the local civil guard station up to 15 times. With frustration in his heart, he criticized the institution for their lack of urgency in searching rural roads or utilizing vehicles before sunrise. He accused them of neglect, citing a shortage of gas as their excuse. But the civil guards refuted his claims, defending their customary practice of waiting for a few hours to pass before initiating a search after a missing person report. A father's plea for his daughter's safe return hung in the balance as the truth behind the delay remained shrouded in doubt and despair. As the night deepened, the frantic search for Blanco commenced at 2:30 a.m. Her family, friends, and authorities scoured the streets of the town and the surrounding area, but the civil guard had not yet filed an official missing person report. A missing report was filed at 8 a.m., and the decision to publicize the case was made at noon. Blanco's family reached out to the regional TV station Telemadrid, imploring them for help. At 9 a.m., Eva's lifeless body had been discovered by two elderly residents, 6 kilometers away from Algueta, near a road construction site between Cobeña and Belvis de Jarama. The area was known to be frequented by young couples seeking privacy inside their cars. Initially, a dreadful accident was suspected, with the possibility that she might have been run over by a car. However, when the civil guard arrived, the horrifying truth emerged. Blanco, lying face down on the ground, had been mercilessly stabbed multiple times while desperately trying to escape her assailant. The clothes she wore on the day of her disappearance, a pair of jeans, a dark sweater, and mountain boots, clung to her lifeless form, with only one sleeve of her jacket missing, hinting at a sinister struggle. The investigators believed that both Blanco and her killer had arrived at the scene in a vehicle, but heavy rain during the night had erased any tire tracks or crucial forensic evidence. Despite the challenging circumstances, the investigators discovered faint footprints from Blanco and a foreboding clue of footprints of a man wearing size 42 moccasins, providing a faint glimmer of hope in their pursuit of justice for the innocent soul lost. The civil guard notified Blanco's family of the discovery at 3:30 p.m. The news caused commotion in the town of just 12,300 people at the time, with no recent instances of violent crime. At around 7 p.m., 200 people gathered silently before Blanco's home to condemn her murder. Her funeral was held on the 23rd of April and was attended by 2,000 people. In a devastating revelation from the autopsy report, Eva endured a horrifying fate, suffering 19 stab wounds to her back, leading to her tragic demise due to blood loss around 4 a.m. The murder weapon, a Navaja-style knife between 8 and 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter wide, became a terrifying instrument of her torment. The first stab occurred while she was still in a vehicle, while the subsequent ones followed as she desperately tried to run up a slope beside the road. Many of the wounds, particularly those on her ear and the back of her head, were distressingly deemed passionate in nature, adding to the brutality of the crime. Among the horrifying details, the first injury stood out, deep and potentially fatal, even without the additional wounds inflicted later. The tragedy did not end there, as the evidence revealed the heartbreaking violation of Blanco's innocence. The presence of the same man's bodily fluid was discovered in her mouth, genitals, and underwear, testimony to a heinous act that defies comprehension. The discovery of a red fiber in her mouth, identified as common car upholstery by the Catalonia Textile Museum and Documentation Center, confirmed that Blanco had been in a vehicle after her abduction. These shocking details painted a heart-rending picture of the unspeakable pain and suffering endured by this innocent soul in her final moments. Due to the body being found dressed and showing no apparent signs of violence, both the coroner and officers initially speculated that the sexual encounter may have been consensual, leading to a fatal altercation afterward. In stark contrast, Eva's grieving parents firmly believed that their daughter had been abducted, sexually assaulted at knife point, and then murdered to prevent her from seeking justice for the heinous act. The civil guard anticipated that the case would be closed after a short investigation, with their prevailing theory pointing towards a single individual known to Blanco. Allegedly, this person approached her in a car, offering a ride that she accepted, leading them to the secluded construction site, a well-known lover's lane, where the tragic events unfolded. Blanco's ex-boyfriend, residing in Fuente El Saz, who had recently separated from her, became an initial suspect, but he was cleared following police questioning. Subsequently, the focus of the investigation shifted towards adult men known to Blanco's family, individuals that she might have trusted to board their vehicle. As the investigation progressed, the case proved to be more intricate than initially thought, and the likelihood of a stranger's involvement could not be ruled out. Blanco's close acquaintances vehemently maintained that she would never willingly enter a vehicle with someone she did not know, leading them to believe that she had been coerced into the car under duress. Further complicating matters, several residents connected the incident to a suspicious blue vehicle observed in the area at around 12 a.m. One of the car's occupants was described as a fair-haired male, estimated to be roughly 20 years of age. Unfortunately, nobody thought to write down the car's license plate number, which could have been an essential piece of evidence in the investigation. The discovery of an unidentified male bodily fluid on the young woman's body and clothes during the investigation was concealed from Blanco's family and the public, as the officers secretly collected DNA samples from her male relatives and acquaintances to compare with the fluid's DNA. Eva's father's sample was obtained from a discarded cigarette he smoked while drinking coffee and discussing the case with the civil guard officers, while others were surreptitiously taken during unrelated blood alcohol content tests or from the cups and glasses they used in bars. Despite not finding any matches, the civil guard remained steadfast in their belief that the perpetrator was an adult male residing in Al Hit, or a nearby town. The pursuit of justice continued in the shadows while the heartbroken family yearned for answers that instead created more questions. 8 months after the tragic incident, Blanco's mother found in her daughter's room 2 hidden notebooks that were labeled 95 to 96 and 96 to 97. Within these pages, Blanco had meticulously chronicled her daily experiences until the day of her murder. The entries predominantly featured the names Eva and Miguel, referring to her ex-boyfriend, written repeatedly in various pen colors. However, just 2 pages before the final one, the names Eva and Miguel were replaced with Eva and 34310. Despite numerous efforts to decipher the significance of the number, all attempts proved futile. Speculations surrounding the number range from it being related to the phone code of Spain, which is 34, and the postal code of the town, which is 110, to yet again being associated with a pager number from a Coca-Cola promotion. At that time, the mystery of the number remained unsolved, leaving Blanco's loved ones and investigators haunted by the enigmatic clue. Upon learning that his DNA had been compared to the fluids found in his daughter's body, and that he had been excluded as a suspect, Blanco's father initiated a campaign to rally other residents of Alhiti for voluntary DNA samples to aid in apprehending his daughter's killer. With the support of Mayor Jesus Herrera Fernandez, an official announcement was made in November 1999, urging all male residents over 16 years old, estimated to be 5,000 individuals, to voluntarily provide their hair or saliva samples. However, Spanish judicial organizations unanimously rejected the proposition, deeming it simple-minded, disproportionate, useless, and potentially stigmatizing for those who chose not to provide their DNA without a court order, which was their legal right to do so. They also believed that the culprit would obviously not volunteer to provide their sample. Nevertheless, Blanco's father managed to collect 2,013 samples from the residents of Alhet and nearby towns, depositing them at the local courthouse until further decisions were made. The examining magistrate of the case sought a report from Madrid's chief prosecutor to assess the legal feasibility of such tests. The response that was issued on March 30th, 2000, emphasized that testing should be limited to individuals who could be considered suspicious based on the investigation rather than merely volunteers. Consequently, only samples from 45 people were tested, including 12 relatives from Eva's father's and mother's sides, her acquaintances, and individuals with a prior criminal record, with a particular focus on cases involving sexual misconduct and knife violence. The search for justice persisted amidst the legal complexities and the never-ending determination of those who sought the truth behind Eva's tragic fate. Despite the case hitting a standstill, the homicide group of the Civil Guard remained resolute, never allowing it to fade into oblivion. Over the years, each new member and commander took it upon themselves to revisit the case file, hoping to bring a fresh perspective. The investigation expanded beyond borders, with information sought from various law enforcement agencies, including the Ertzaintza and the FBI. A DNA specialist from the University of Santiago de Compostela re-examined the evidence, revealing that the DNA belonged to a man of non-European descent. Over the years, the number of individuals investigated soared to 1,503, including 208 men from Alget and neighboring towns who voluntarily underwent DNA testing, even encompassing criminals on leave during the time of the murder. A new examining magistrate allowed the opening and checking of the 2013 envelopes containing the names of the volunteers from 1999, but not the testing of all DNA samples. La Sexta's investigative show, La Sexta Columna, aired an episode about the case titled Eva, a Cold Case, on April 26, 2013, that featured interviews with Blanco's loved ones and experts. Psychologist and criminologist Vicente Garrido proposed the theory of a stalker as the likely perpetrator, challenging the Civil Guard's secret boyfriend hypothesis. The lack of defensive wounds suggested threats, and the criminal could be of low intelligence, uneducated, and emotionally immature, given that he was seeking intimacy with a teenager instead of a woman his age. He might have had no family, as they would have noticed his late-night activities, and the possibility of him continuing his crimes elsewhere or being in prison for other attacks was considered. Following the program's broadcast, a woman came forward to authorities reporting that she had seen a suspicious man at the road construction site around 8 a.m. before Eva's body had been found. The man appeared disheveled, walking in the rain without an umbrella, looking like he hadn't slept through the night, and was searching for something before getting into a white Renault 18. The Civil Guard considered her testimony reliable, as other witnesses had also reported a Renault 18 over the years, which matched the fiber found on Blanco's body. On October 28, 2013, a facial composite of the suspect, made in collaboration with the new witness, was released. The man was described to be between 35 and 40 years old in 1997, around 1.7 to 1.8 meters tall, corpulent with his weight between 75 to 80 kilograms, with short spiky brown hair, a square and hardened face, and dark sunken eyes. He was said to be dressed in a white shirt and a V-neck sweater, and he drove a white Renault 18 with red upholstery. To gather clues, a confidential phone number and email address were set up, resulting in 100 emails received by January 1, 2014. By the end of 2013, a breakthrough in the investigation revealed that the DNA from the fluids pointed to a man of North African descent. The civil guard petitioned the 300 North African men who lived in Algete in 1997 for voluntary samples. A former neighbor of Blanco's, now residing in southern France, shared a remarkable genetic match with the killer, indicating a possible sibling relationship. Further analysis of a brother living in Murcia, who had never lived in Algete, yielded an identical match, leading to a European arrest warrant for the third brother, Ahmed Chel Gersh. On October 1, 2015, Ahmed was apprehended outside his workplace in Villeurbanne, France, in a joint operation involving the Civil Guard and the French Gendarmerie. Ahmed Chel Gersh, born on March 1, 1963, in Taza, Morocco, was 34 years old at the time of the murder. He married a 20-year-old Spanish woman in Madrid in 1989 and obtained Spanish citizenship in the 1990s. They went on to have children, and at the time of Blanco's murder, Chel's wife was 5 months pregnant. They never appeared as residents of Algete since they lived in a caravan provided by Chel's employer at a plant nursery where he worked as a delivery man. Their residence, located next to the Puente del Retamar road, was approximately 4 kilometers away from the crime scene. In 1999, the Chel family moved to France, where, although they continued to be listed as married in Spain, they had separated amicably. Chel remarried to a 24-year-old Moroccan student in Villeurbanne in 2003, settling in a village approximately 20 kilometers from the Swiss border, and went on to have children as well. In France, he worked as a welder for a farm machinery company, but his relationship with co-workers was reportedly troubled. When confronted with the DNA evidence, Chel claimed that 2 unidentified men brought him to Blanco's body and forced him to touch himself over her body. However, his ex-wife contradicted this account by informing journalists that Ahmed had actually gone out with his brothers, as they often did during the weekends. She revealed that one of the brothers had disclosed that they were at the same disco as Blanco and had spoken to her after she argued with her ex-boyfriend. While Blanco initially left the disco with the brothers, she returned inside with her friends around 11 p.m. Surprisingly, Chel's ex-wife stated that neither she nor the brothers had ever been interrogated by the police or the civil guard during the investigation. While she denied any mistreatment by Chel, she later admitted to his aggressive behavior when under the influence of alcohol. Descriptions from former co-workers and female customers portrayed him as unsociable, aggressive when drunk, and inappropriate towards women. Blanco's family had minimal interaction with Chel's brothers at most and had never even met Chel himself. On October 5, 2015, Chel attempted to harm himself in his cell, but agreed to be deported to Spain for trial 2 days later. At the preliminary hearing on October 13, he declined to make a statement but provided a DNA sample. Charged with murder, sexual assault, and illegal detention, he was held in Soto del Rio prison pending trial as the DNA testing confirmed his involvement. On October 19th, Chel's defense unsuccessfully requested his release pending trial, arguing a lack of evidence besides DNA and that the civil guard's hypothesis over the past 18 years suggests that Eva willingly got into a car with someone she knew, engaging in consensual intercourse before her tragic death. Therefore, they believed that there was no sense in charging Chel with sexual assault. Due to the idea of Blanco willingly accepting a ride from the Moroccan, given her friend's assurance that she would never get into a car with a stranger, also made them believe he had no involvement. Chel's lawyer argued that Blanco would never willingly associate with the Moroccan due to alleged neo-Nazi sympathies evidenced in her diaries, linking her to the investigation's early focus on the neo-Nazi group, Bases Autonomous. Chel's first wife sparked another conspiracy theory during an interview with TVE's La Mañana, suggesting the involvement of several people known to the Chel family and hinting at those responsible for the murder. She claimed that Chel returned home between 10 o'clock and 11 p.m. that night, citing her pregnancy as the reason he wouldn't stay out late. According to her, he mentioned being mugged by some boys but didn't report it due to fear. In January 2016, prison psychiatric support lifted the anti-suicide measures from Chel, who claimed he was forced to pleasure himself on Blanco, denying any penetration, but was unable to explain how his bodily fluid was found in her genital area. On January 29, 2016, Chel was discovered dead in his cell, having taken his own life by hanging himself with his shoelaces. The prosecution was officially concluded on February 15, 2016. Eva's family, while finding some closure in knowing who had murdered their daughter, felt disappointed that he did not face the consequences for his wicked deeds, but believed that justice would hopefully be served in the afterlife. Eva Blanco Puig had dreams of becoming an architect and had a passion for drawing. She was an ardent fan of Bon Jovi and also African music. Her sensitivity and sincerity created strong bonds with her friends, and her strong laughter became a defining trait of her personality. She was a responsible and caring older sister, always setting a positive example to her younger sisters. The story of Eva Blanco echoes through time, a story of loss, pain, and the relentless pursuit of justice. As we remember her, we also remember the strength of a community united, seeking answers and closure for the young girl whose life was taken too soon. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lauren Phelps. In a quiet suburban neighborhood in North Carolina, a young woman named Lauren Hugelmeyer Phelps was found brutally murdered in her home. She was a loving wife, a dedicated mother, and a cherished member of her community. The shocking discovery of Lauren's lifeless body sent shockwaves through the tight-knit community, leaving family, friends, and neighbors in disbelief and mourning. Lauren was described as a compassionate and vibrant woman who had a passion for helping others. As the investigation unfolded, the disturbing events leading up to her tragic death were revealed, uncovering a dark and unexpected truth. The investigation into Lauren's murder was complex, as law enforcement meticulously pieced together the events of that fateful night. Their dedication and commitment to justice became unwavering in the pursuit of truth. This is the story of Lauren Hugelmeyer Phelps, a life taken far too soon, leaving a community grappling with grief and seeking answers. Lauren Hugelmeyer Phelps was born on June 9, 1988 in Los Angeles County, California, United States, and raised in Kentucky by her parents Lori and Dale Hugelmeyer. She had a very close, supportive, and loving family with two sisters. Lauren was especially close with her father and one of her sisters, Beth Agner. She was known to be a friendly, caring, kind, and smart girl. Her family practiced Christianity and were very religious, eventually moving to North Carolina before she graduated. Lauren first met Matthew in school while they were teenagers. However, they weren't particularly close at the time. Matthew, on the other hand, didn't have the same kind of family that Lauren had. He had a very rough upbringing and barely had a family at all. His father wasn't in his life, and his mother was only around half the time. His mother remarried several times, and Matthew was never able to form a bond with any of his stepfathers. Due to his dysfunctional home life, he began acting out and eventually lived with his grandparents full-time. After joining high school, Matthew ended up making friends with the wrong crowd. He and his friends were using drugs and alcohol, specifically quercetin cough and cold medicine. As is known, most cough medicines can give someone a high feeling when taken in large doses, and can even be addictive when abused for long-term use. Matthew's grandparents decided to take him out of public school and enrolled him in a private Christian academy in hopes of changing his behavior and getting him back on track to live a decent life. Luckily, it worked for the most part. He stopped abusing drugs and alcohol, got his grades up, and did very well in school. However, he continued to abuse cough syrup for the rest of his life. Lauren and Matthew reconnected on social media. It started with DMs on Instagram, then texting, talking on the phone, and video chats. They continued this for a while until one day Matthew decided to move to North Carolina to end their long-distance relationship. Matthew was then acquainted with Lauren's family and spent a lot of time with them. Her family loved him and thought he was amazing for the most part. Lauren's mother adored Matthew and treated him like her own son, but Lauren's father had his suspicions about him. He thought there was something off about Matthew and felt their relationship was moving too fast, since Matthew had just moved to North Carolina after only a few months of online communication. Lauren's father's suspicions were proven when they invited Matthew over for family game night. They were playing 20 questions, and it eventually came out that he was married once before. Everyone thought it was strange that he hadn't mentioned this before and wasn't talking much about it. They asked him questions, but he chose to dodge and not answer most of them. Lauren got over it and put it behind her, but the rest of her family remained cautious about him. Lauren and Matthew continued spending time together, and the more time they spent together, the more they fell for each other. Matthew seemed like the perfect man for her. They had a great connection and similar hobbies. He got along with her family, her friends liked him, and they did many things together, including taking trips and vacations. Matthew then disclosed to Lauren that he wanted to become a pastor, and she loved this news. It kind of sealed the deal for them, and she knew he was the man she wanted to spend her life with. They even became engaged later in 2015. The newly engaged couple had an engagement party, but it was mostly Lauren's family and friends who attended. Matthew's mother showed up, but she did something that annoyed Lauren and put a sour taste in her family's mouth. Matthew's mother showed up wearing a white dress, which looked like it was intentional. As everyone automatically knows, you never show up to someone's engagement party or their wedding wearing white. Throughout their engagement, there was a lot of conflict between Lauren and Matthew's mother. Matthew's mother just didn't simply tolerate Lauren for some reason and didn't think she was good enough for her son. Lauren eventually was able to put their issues behind her and continued with the wedding plan. The two became married the following year in November 2016. Lauren and Matthew both loved Harry Potter and Star Wars and decided to have a Star Wars-themed wedding, having the best men hold lightsabers. Despite all that, their marriage began to tumble down as soon as the wedding was over, when they began having many fights, and there was so much stress between the two of them. One of the stresses in their marriage was contributed by Matthew's mother. On one occasion, 6 months after Lauren and Matthew got married, they went to Kentucky to visit his family. Matthew's mother called Lauren and told them they were going to be doing a family photo shoot and everyone needed to wear blue. Lauren was excited and picked out a few nice outfits to bring with her. But when they arrived, she couldn't even participate in the photo shoot at all. As it turns out, the men were wearing blue and the women were wearing white. Lauren was disappointed with that, and even though Matthew mentioned that his mom just might have accidentally misinformed her, Lauren and her family knew that she did it on purpose. Nonetheless, that wasn't nearly the biggest issue they had in their marriage. At the age of 29, Lauren was a highly independent and hardworking woman, while her husband Matthew, 30, studied to become a pastor for their local church. Lauren took up jobs as an auditor, a daycare worker, sold scented candles, and even participated in an MLM company to keep them financially afloat. Having been married for less than a year, the pair looked like a picture-perfect couple through the lens of social media. But the reality of their relationship was much different, which only came to light after the fall of 2017. On September 1st, 2017, Matthew made a frantic 911 call. He told the dispatcher that he had taken Corisodin cough and cold before going to sleep, and when he awoke, he was covered in blood. There was a knife on the bed, and his wife was on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Matthew admitted that he had no recollection of what had transpired, but he admitted to his suspicions of being his wife's attacker. Shortly after the 911 call was made, police arrived at the scene and found Lauren covered in blood, lying in a fetal position on the floor of their bedroom, holding clumps of her hair in both of her hands. As Matthew had described, a knife was found perfectly placed on the bed, and the cold medicine was on the bathroom counter. However, an autopsy later revealed that Lauren was stabbed 123 times in her head, neck, and arms. Some wounds were 4 inches deep, turning Matthew's claims of what had befallen questionable at best. The detectives took him into custody, but when he refused to change his narrative and admit to the truth, they began looking deeper into his life and relationship with Lauren, uncovering a myriad of incriminating evidence against him. During the investigation back at the crime scene, investigators believed that the crime scene didn't seem authentic. They claimed that the cold medicine looked like it was purposely placed there to make it seem like he took it. The knife was set on the bed exactly like he claimed it to be, and everything at the scene just looked staged. It doesn't help that there was little to no blood on Matthew at all, besides a few drops on his feet and his shoes. Investigators said that there was no way he couldn't have any blood on him after a brutal murder like that. Lastly, his entire demeanor at the crime scene was strange. On the phone, he was frantic and crying, but when the police were questioning him in person, he was calm and collected. He seemed quite calm and put together. He seemed almost emotionless. As the investigators delved into his past, they found out that not only did Matthew have a record of abusing medicine in the past and using it to excuse his actions, but he also had a secret Instagram profile called Marty Core Radical for his obsession with American Psycho, the 2000 film about a violent and twisted serial killer. In Matthew's Instagram, there were also a lot of disturbing pictures, including Matthew dressing up as a character from American Psycho. He would also heavily talk about Satan, demons, devil worship, and death in general. In the last photo he posted to his account on the night before the murder, he wrote, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer. Found an angel to kill." The police also found a journal that Matthew had, which talks a lot about his insecurities with his marriage, thinking he's not good enough for Lauren, how he doesn't feel good enough for her family, and talks about the jealousy he has about the kind of family she had. He also talked a lot about his depression. In an interview with Matthew's friend, he claimed that Matthew told him that he wanted to know how it felt to kill someone, but he thought Matthew wasn't serious at the time. It became quite a shock to Lauren's family when they found out about what he was interested in, and her parents became very concerned because one of the reasons Lauren fell for Matthew was due to how devoted he was to Christianity, but instead he had other dark secret fantasies and likings. Lauren's friends who were interviewed mentioned that they were having major financial troubles. Lauren was very hardworking her entire life and worked 2 jobs while married to Matthew. The first one being an auditor for a Fortune 500 company, and the second being a babysitter working in a church daycare. She also had her own little side business where she would make candles and sell them on MLM. She even had a YouTube channel where she'd advertise these candles. They also mentioned that Matthew was always between jobs and never seemed to hold one down for more than a few months. The couple had a lot of debt, but Matthew was the one who was causing them to drown in bills. He spent tons of money, especially at Best Buy, where he spent thousands of dollars. He would even steal money right out of Lauren's purse and would take money out of their savings account that was used for vacations. Before she married Matthew, Lauren had around $10,000 saved in her account. At the time of her death, she had a little less than $1,000. Along with the financial issues, they even started doubting each other when it came to being faithful. Matthew was cheating on Lauren, and she had a valid reason for being jealous. Matthew, however, had no real reason to accuse Lauren of being unfaithful. The only reason he had stemmed from jealousy was when he thought a mutual friend at their church had feelings for her, and vice versa, and she didn't. Lauren's friends, including her sister Beth, all mentioned that she would text them all the time about her stress, and told them she was really considering leaving Matthew and that she wasn't happy anymore, and he turned into a whole different person. She just wanted to keep trying at first, because she's religious and didn't want a divorce. All of that changed one night when she was cooking dinner for Matthew while being on the phone with her sister. There was a knock on the door. Matthew answered it and looked back at Lauren and said he was leaving to go hang out with a friend named Valerie. Lauren was upset and mentioned that she was cooking dinner, and he said he would be back soon, and he left. She waited around for him to come back until she received a text from him. "Just eat dinner without me. I'm having way too much fun with Valerie." This was now Lauren's breaking point. She texted her sister and mentioned that she was finally done with him for good. Because of their financial issues, she not only had to put restrictions on her husband's expenses, but she also threatened to walk away from him if he didn't change on one occasion. Thus, the authorities determined that Matthew knew precisely what he was doing when he stabbed his wife to death on that fateful day. Investigators also interviewed their neighbor, who admitted that she and Matthew had a bond at one point. They would often chat and flirt with each other, and they bonded over their similar problems with depression and anxiety. However, she began to distance herself when he started talking to her about disturbing things such as death and suicide. She also had a gun and exposed Carrie's license to him on one occasion, but Matthew walked up to her one night and said, "You know, I can take that gun from you and kill somebody with it." During his trial, the defense didn't have a leg to stand on and had an overwhelming amount of evidence against them. It didn't help that Matthew was stated to be completely aware of what he was doing, and there wasn't nearly enough cold medicine in his system to cause any kind of crime, let alone committing a brutal murder. The creators of the cold medicine he was taking even made a statement that there have been a lot of studies on their product, and no one has ever done anything like this before. Lauren's parents also made statements on her behalf, and investigators mentioned that they found questions in his internet searches asking, "How loopy does quercetin make you? And has anyone ever been high from quercetin?" In October of 2018, to escape the death penalty, he admitted that the alibi of the cough and cold medicine was a lie, and that he had pretended to be delirious during the 911 call to get away with his actions. Matthew was charged with premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Matthew even stood up to give Lauren's family an apology for what he did to her and what he did to them. But her parents said his apology means nothing, and they will never forgive him for taking their daughter away. Lauren's story has ignited a collective effort to support victims of domestic violence and raise awareness about the resources available to those in need. Community initiatives have sprung up, providing support and a haven for those seeking refuge. The pursuit of justice for Lauren led to the conviction of the individual responsible for her murder. The intervention and support for victims. As we remember Lauren, we honor her memory by continuing to stand against domestic violence and supporting those affected by it. Her legacy serves as a reminder of the urgent need for education, awareness, and compassion within our communities. In the end, Lauren Hugelmeyer Phelps' legacy will be one of resilience and hope. May her memory inspire us to create a world where love, empathy, and support prevail, ensuring that no one should live in fear within their own homes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in the small town of Scottsville, Kentucky, with a population of just over 4,000 people. Scottsville was mostly a farming community where many folks knew each other well, or at least knew someone from each local family. Like in many similar small towns, there weren't a lot of entertainment options in Scottsville. The only major thing for locals was school sports, particularly football. The local school had pretty decent fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they regularly hosted games and competitions. It became a sort of tradition for locals to attend these activities, especially if their children were involved. Gabby's family was no different. Her parents had 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter. The oldest boy was on the school's football team, while Gabby herself got into cheerleading in November 2015 when she was 7. Their town was gearing up for the biggest football game of the year, and Gabby's older brother was on the team. However, Gabby was more interested in just hanging out and having fun with other kids than in the game itself. Her parents initially planned to leave Gabby at home with their youngest son under the care of a relative, but Gabby managed to convince them to take her with them. On the evening of November 14th, they headed to the school field. Besides the local crowd, there were also many folks from the other county who came to watch the game and support their team. As soon as their family arrived at the stadium, Gabby spotted her friends and asked her mom if she could go play with them. Her mom agreed, but warned her to stay within the school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers and Gabby ran off to her friends. From then on, Gabby dashed back and forth to her mom a few times before going off to play again. At some point, she also came to her dad, who was in an announcement room, and Gabby asked him for some money to buy some snacks at the concession stand before darting away. Sometime later, Gabby's friends ran up to her mom in the bleachers. She glanced at the group and immediately noticed her daughter wasn't among them. The girls asked if she had seen Gabby, and they seemed visibly worried. The woman replied that she hadn't seen her for quite a while. She then asked what was going on, and the girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek. Gabby was supposed to find them, and they hid in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot and went to look for her, but Gabby was nowhere to be found. They called her name, checked all the places they had been playing before, but their friend seemed to have vanished into thin air. That's when they thought Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to her mom and ran there. Her mother immediately started to panic and went to her husband, but Gabby wasn't there either. She told him that Gabby was missing, and he rushed to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother went to the concession stand where her daughter had wanted to buy some snacks and began searching for her there. On the way, the parents met their friends and informed them about their daughter's disappearance. Hearing that, they joined the worried parents, helping with the search. After scouring the entire area around the stadium and finding no sign of Gabby, the parents went back and made an announcement over the loudspeakers, hoping Gabby would hear it, but that yielded no results either. By that time, there was a break in the game and people were returning to the bleachers. The parents continued asking everyone if they had seen Gabby, and some of them joined in the search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. The adults walked through it, but still couldn't find her. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since her disappearance, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers immediately arrived at the school, listened to the parents' and Gabby's friends' accounts, and began searching. The local police department had little experience with such serious cases, as child disappearances rarely occurred in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario that someone had abducted or attacked her. In that case, they faced one problem. The likely perpetrator was probably at the stadium watching the game, which was about to end any minute. So the officers realized they had very little time, and soon people would start going home, including the alleged perpetrator. Eventually, they decided to halt the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside the building. Officers watched every exit to prevent anyone from slipping away. The police didn't inform people about what was happening to avoid disrupting the search efforts. If everyone knew that the police were considering the possibility that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl was in the same vicinity as them, the situation could quickly escalate. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. They reached the baseball field and headed into the woods. After some distance into the trees, they stumbled upon a small creek and saw her body in it. They identified her as Gabby and called for an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner. However, even a visual inspection was enough to suggest that the cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were distinct marks on her neck. Part of her clothing was also missing, leading the police to suspect that the victim had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw the ambulance near the woods and thought the police had found her daughter who needed medical attention. She rushed there, but the police stopped her as they didn't want the woman to see this horrifying scene. Now that the police were dealing with a murder, they decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. Investigators believed that the killer was likely among them, so they needed to quickly figure out how to identify them. They spoke to Gabby's parents and told them about what likely happened to their daughter. Investigators also asked if they had any suspicions about who could have committed such a heinous act. Perhaps they had noticed someone suspicious, or someone had threatened their family. But Gabby's parents insisted they had no idea who could have done this. Detectives then talked to Gabby's friends and asked if they had seen anything strange that evening. Maybe someone had been watching or following them. But the girls said they couldn't recall anything like that. The police also brought them to the gym and asked them to look carefully at the people present, hoping they might remember something, but it didn't lead to anything. The lead detective continued to believe that the victim's friends might have seen the kidnapper, but either they were afraid to point him out or simply didn't understand the significance of their observations due to their age. He kept asking them to remember every moment of that evening, and finally, one of them mentioned that when they hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. She remembered almost no details about his appearance except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the cashier who sold tickets to the game, and he also recalled the man with the denim jacket hanging on his arm. He added that this person seemed strange and intoxicated to him. However, they still couldn't identify this man. At that moment, the police gradually interviewed the attendees of the game, and pretty soon, everyone learned why they were being held there. Realizing that they might be in the same room with the killer, people were frightened, especially for their kids, but still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators cross-referenced the list of names of all the men in the gym with a sex offenders registry, but there were no matches. The police also sent officers to the homes of several such offenders living within close proximity, but they all had solid alibis, and none of them were near the school. Meanwhile, officers continued to interview people at the school, and they soon came across some interesting leads. Several individuals told them that during the game they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the women's restroom behaving strangely. He was a local resident, so many people knew him, but according to witnesses, that evening he was acting suspiciously. They also mentioned that he was wearing a denim jacket, the same description provided by one of Gabby's friends who had also seen a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He mentioned that during the game, Timothy seemed kind of off, and his younger son was playing on the field. But according to the witness, Timothy, who usually was very involved in his son's sports achievements, wasn't even paying attention to the field and seemed lost. Several more witnesses told the police that Timothy's behavior seemed strange to them, prompting investigators to talk to him. It was already nighttime, and they had to release almost everyone from the school. They decided to visit him, but first asked the local sheriff what he thought about Timothy. The sheriff said that he had known him practically all his life and highly doubted that he was capable of such a crime. Timothy had almost no criminal record except for some traffic fines, and he had never been involved in any suspicious situations before. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children, and the police decided to go talk to him immediately. When they knocked on his door, Timothy opened it, and the officers asked if he knew why they were there. He replied that he had heard about her murder, but had nothing to do with it. Detectives then decided to try one trick and asked him a loaded question. They asked whether he had any explanation for several videos provided by eyewitnesses, showing him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder. There were no videos or witnesses, and the question was designed to prompt the man to reveal some new information if he indeed had something to do with the crime. At first, Timothy said he didn't know, but then he quickly corrected himself. He admitted that he did talk to Gabby that evening near the stadium. According to him, he stepped out to smoke, and at that moment, several girls ran past him. Shortly after, Gabby passed by and asked if he had seen her friends because they were playing hide and seek, and she needed to find them. Timothy pointed her in the right direction, and she ran off. The detectives found it suspicious how quickly Timothy changed his story. Moreover, his account indicated that he spoke to the victim just minutes before her disappearance, and at that time, there were no witnesses outside the stadium, so it gave him the opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives also asked if he would have any explanation if they found his DNA on the victim's body, and Timothy calmly replied no. Finally, they asked him to provide them with a DNA sample and the clothing he wore at the stadium. He agreed to both requests, but as soon as Timothy handed over the clothing to the police, they discovered some stains on it. There was something resembling blood stains on the pants, denim jacket, and even underwear. Detectives asked if he could explain it, and Timothy claimed that they were insane and that it wasn't blood, but some dirt. However, the police thought otherwise, although they needed to wait for the DNA analysis results before they could arrest him. Even though this case was a priority for the lab, it still took several days for the experts to examine all the samples and conduct the analysis. The forensic pathologist soon finished examining the body and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. He also confirmed that the victim had been brutally assaulted and extracted a biological sample of the perpetrator, which was sent to the laboratory the day after the murder. Something unexpected happened. The police received an anonymous letter from someone who reported a suspicious individual present at the game. The author wrote down the model of his car and even the license plate, which allowed the investigators to quickly identify the owner of the vehicle. It turned out to be a student living half an hour's drive from Scottsville. The police went there and began questioning him, but the guy claimed he hadn't been to any game and hadn't even heard of the murder. He added that he was at work that evening, and the police found undoubtful confirmation of his alibi. He was crossed off the list of suspects, but the author of the letter was never found. Perhaps someone decided to frame him or play a cruel prank, but the guy was truly innocent. The police soon received another lead. Several people reported strange behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He told different people that he had been at the game, but then claimed he hadn't attended it. The young man also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. Detectives found out that this boy was Timothy Madden's son, but that wasn't the most surprising revelation. They learned that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had become angry with his father and held a knife to his throat, threatening to kill him. Knowing this information, the police headed to speak with him. But there was a problem. They needed the presence of the minor's parents, and his mother refused to provide a DNA sample, leaving the police empty-handed. In Scottsville, a small town where everyone knew each other, rumors spread like wildfire. People heard that the police were looking into the Madden family regarding Gabby's murder, sparking various theories. Some thought one of Madden's troubled older sons could be responsible, while others suspected Madden himself or thought he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also became aware of these rumors, which came as a big shock to them. Gabby's father had known Timothy since third grade and also knew his whole family. Their sons played on the same football team, and their daughters were cheerleading together. Both families were close, even sitting near each other at the game. With all this in mind, Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone from their circle could have been involved in the murder. After the rumors spread around town, something else happened. The eldest son of the Madden family, who was 20 years old, began contacting local officers on social media. He used foul language and threatened them, demanding they leave his family alone. He was immediately arrested for the threats, and the police quickly discovered that there was an active warrant for his arrest in another town. It turned out he was suspected of assaulting a minor girl. They brought him in for questioning, and the young man claimed he was simply frustrated by the accusations against his family. He also said he had nothing to do with the murder and that he was at his cousin's house in the neighboring town that evening. He agreed to provide his DNA sample, which was also sent to the laboratory on November 20th. 6 days after the murder, Gabby's funeral took place. Hundreds of people came to say goodbye, not only from Scottville, but also from other towns. People donated a significant amount of money to Gabby's parents to help cover the funeral and farewell ceremony expenses. Meanwhile, the lab completed the DNA analysis and compared the blood and semen samples with Timothy and his son's DNA. The results showed a complete match. The semen found on the victim's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on his clothes belonged to Gabby. Upon receiving this news, detectives went to the funeral when Gabby's parents were alone and informed them of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police officers went to Timothy's house and he was arrested. As he was being transported from the police station, he shouted to the gathered reporters that he was innocent. Later, he claimed that the blood on his clothes was his own, as he had scratched himself passing by a fence, even though initially, he had told the police that it wasn't blood at all but mud. With the DNA match in hand, the investigators took the case to court and the prosecution stated they would seek the death penalty. During the trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer insisted his client was innocent and that the origin of the evidence raised serious questions. He argued that during the supposed murder, Timothy was at the stadium filming the game, even though Timothy himself had told the police he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer also tried to point out the fact that Gabby's body was found in a creek, but his client's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium. Timothy's mother, who lived with him, stated that Timothy returned home in clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution pointed out that all these arguments crumbled in the face of the fact that the suspect's semen was found on the victim's body. There could be no other explanation for this, and therefore, there was no doubt about Timothy's involvement. According to the police, his account of that evening contains some portion of the truth. He could have indeed stepped out of the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friends. She knew Timothy well because he was the father of one of her friends. She might have approached him and asked where the other girls had gone, and that's when he devised a plan. He could have said they ran into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to escort Gabby there. Once they were a few hundred yards away from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then returned to the game. The wait for the trial dragged on for years, much to Gabby's family's dismay. They wanted the murderer to be punished, but due to bureaucracy, the case progressed slowly. In 2019, 4 years after the murder, the parties began discussing a possible plea deal. The prosecution offered to drop the death penalty in exchange for a life sentence, with Timothy having to admit his guilt. Gabby's parents agreed to this option because the endless wait for the trial was a heavy burden for them. Moreover, if the trial finally began, they would have to attend hearings for months, essentially reliving their daughter's death all over again. Timothy, who kept insisting on his innocence, eventually agreed and confessed. However, the terms of the deal didn't require him to reveal the details of what he did. He just had to admit his guilt. These terms didn't satisfy Gabby's family because they wanted the perpetrator to fully confess to what he had done to their daughter. During the court hearing, Gabby's father started yelling at Timothy, while the defendant's relatives began shouting at Gabby's family. Eventually, the judge had to take a break and separate them. In the end, Timothy received a life sentence and went to serve it in a maximum security prison. But that's not all. In 2016, a year after Gabby's murder, something else happened involving Timothy Madden. A boy from a neighboring state saw a news report about the crime and recognized Timothy. Several years ago, he and his friend were walking near a mall parking lot when an adult man approached them. He tried to convince the boys to get into his car for a ride, but they found the offer extremely strange and ran away from him. The friend's relative contacted the police, and according to the boy who saw the news report, he was no other than Timothy Madden. However, there was no substantial evidence for this case, so it didn't progress any further. Nevertheless, if Timothy had indeed attempted to abduct two boys in another state, it could tell us about his true nature more clearly. Perhaps before Gabby's murder, he had been trying to find other victims but had no success. And on that evening when she approached him near the stadium, he decided to seize the opportunity to satisfy his horrific fantasies.